Tonight, a crucial moment in this unprecedented sprint to the White House. Vice President Kamala Harris.
If you've got something to say it to my face.
And former President Donald Trump.
We will make America great again.
Moments away from taking the stage, meeting for the first time face-to-face. Vice President Harris catapulted from running mate to top of the ticket.
And when we fight, we win!
Former President Donald Trump running for the third time.
November 5th is going to be the most important day in the history of this country.
Election Day just 8 weeks away. At the moderator's table tonight, ABC's David Muir and Lindsay Davis. Right now, the ultimate showdown, the ABC News presidential debate. Live from the critical battleground state of Pennsylvania, Martha Raddatz, Jon Karl, Mary Bruce, and Rachel Scott in this ABC News special event, starting right now.
And good evening. I'm Martha Raddatz, joining you live from Philadelphia and across the globe with our powerhouse team coverage as Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are set to face off for the first time in a presidential debate in less than 59 minutes.
And I'm Jonathan Karl. When Kamala Harris and Donald Trump walk on that debate stage in less than an hour, it will be the very first time they have been face-to-face, the first time the two have ever met. And the circumstances of tonight's meeting, beyond extraordinary. Kamala Harris is now the Democratic nominee without competing in a single primary. Donald Trump, the Republican nominee, stands indicted for his efforts to overturn the last election and has suggested he won't accept the results of this one if he doesn't win. Joining us at the anchor desk, Chief White House Correspondent Mary Bruce, Senior Congressional Correspondent Rachel Scott. Both have been out on the campaign trail, crisscrossing the country with the candidates, gearing up for what could be the most consequential moment of this incredibly consequential campaign. Just moments ago, Donald Trump's motorcade arrived here at the National Constitution Center. There you see it. Donald Trump's plane touching down in Philadelphia less than 2 hours ago. Kamala Harris arriving yesterday after spending days hunkered down in debate prep in Pittsburgh. Both campaigns have been here over the past few hours to get a first-hand look at that debate stage. And Mary, Kamala Harris has been preparing for this for weeks.
Intensely preparing. She even went so far as to set up a mock debate stage, that stage there that she is about to walk out on, full with TV lights, doing these mock rehearsals. And she's also been turning to Hillary Clinton. I'm told that they have spoken in the last week. She turned to a lot of Clinton's advisors, those who prepped her for her face-offs with Trump, even one who embodied the role of Donald Trump in those rehearsals, even dressing like the former president. Her goal here tonight on that stage is to really reintroduce herself to voters, remind them of her proposals and her policies, and then to pivot and go on the attack. She wants to remind voters of what Donald Trump stands for, what his administration might look like a second go-round. And yes, she is also going to try and get under his skin, to needle him a bit. The challenge for her will be to bait him without getting baited herself.
Both candidates have been here looking at that debate stage, but I have to say, Rachel, Trump seemed to spend a lot of time looking at all the angles, the camera angles. He has been preparing as well.
Yeah, this is a former president who is keenly aware of image. And despite his advisors insisting he doesn't need any debate prep, the former president, I am told, is taking this very seriously. He knows just how consequential this debate, this moment could be. Also with him during that walkthrough on the debate stage, former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. You may remember she challenged Harris on the debate stage back in 2019.
When she was a Democrat running for president.
When she was a Democrat running for president, now an independent who's supporting Donald Trump. She has been involved in these debate preparations. The big question, of course, tonight, which version of Donald Trump shows up? Is it the former president that stays on message, or is it the former president that's on the attack?
Well, you were on that debate stage. If he shows up on the attack, it's a very small, intimate stage.
Small and intimate. They will be just 6 feet apart. It is the room where it's all going to be happening. The stage is set for tonight's debate. So let's take you inside of that room. I went inside the debate hall just right before the candidates arrived. Take a look. When these two candidates enter this debate hall, it will be their very first time coming face to face, and they'll be standing just 6 feet apart. No live studio audience to cheer them on, no campaign staff allowed in this room either. Donald Trump won the coin toss and decided to give the final word in this debate. Vice President Kamala Harris choosing the podium on the right side of the debate stage. The candidates' microphones will only be turned on when it is their turn to speak. They will have 2 minutes to answer each question, 2 minutes for a rebuttal, and just 60 seconds for any follow-up questions, which means they'll be paying close attention to this clock right here. The colors will change as the time winds down, turning yellow when there's just 15 seconds left and red when their time is up. And of course, sitting right here will be our very own David Muir and Lindsay Davis, who will be moderating the first and likely only debate before the November election.
Air traffic control.
All right, so look, it is one thing to obviously meet your rival, but it's another thing to meet them on stage at the debate for the very first time, less than 60 days out from a consequential election. No pressure, right, Mary?
None at all. But of course, those strict rules that you just mentioned were carefully negotiated by the campaigns. Let's go over them again. No opening statements, only closing remarks. Each candidate's microphone will only be turned on when it is their turn to speak. Otherwise, they will be muted. Former President Donald Trump won that coin toss and chose to deliver the last closing statement. Of course, not unusual for them to want to coordinate all of these details.
Yeah, and Martha...
It's the details, indeed.
The details, and you've been at events. You've moderated general election debates. You, in fact, moderated that last amazing debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
The microphones were not muted, I can tell you that right now. You know, I always tell people the first debate I did in 2012, Joe Biden, Paul Ryan, I said it was like studying for college exams and then taking them in front of 70 million people. The debate with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump was like studying for college exams and then taking it in front of a firing squad. He would attack the moderator. You know, he would say I was unfair. He would say you're giving her more time. You really had to concentrate on keeping them both on message as much as possible. But Donald Trump has changed the debate stage forever. He's changed the way these debates are done. He had that one debate in 2020 where he was really off the rails. I think he learned his lesson from that one, but you absolutely never know what Donald Trump is going to say. And our moderators are so prepared for tonight, but there are always, always surprises.
And let's remember, he is no ordinary candidate. This is absolutely no ordinary election. And we mentioned he is under indictment for trying to overturn the last election. He has suggested he would not accept the results if he won here. We're here at the National Constitution Center. I'm sure we will be talking about the issues, but for the first time, you have a president who is talking about retribution against his enemies if he gets back in office. He has actually suggested military tribunals for his enemies. Should he get back in power. This is a very different kind of election.
It is a very different kind of election. And just what you said, John, that military tribunals. I mean, there are military officers out there who served under Trump before who are worried they're going to get pulled back and court-martialed. Looking at his political opponents.
Former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
His own chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who he basically accused of treason. People like that. It is a different election, and people want to hear about what kind of president he would be again if he wins, and of course, what kind of commander-in-chief Kamala Harris
But Mary, what I'm wondering is, will Kamala Harris make that a central part of her case? Will she prosecute that case against Trump, or will she stick to the issues?
Well, look, she certainly has made clear out on the trail that she is not shying away from prosecuting the case against Trump. It's a central part of her biography as she reintroduces herself to voters here. But really, her focus tonight is on seizing this moment, likely the largest audience she has so far, to make her case and make clear the split screen with Trump.
And, Rachel, January 6th, which we'll probably hear something about here, January 6th is actually something that Donald Trump doesn't want to run away from. He once told me it was one of the proudest moments of his presidency. He's
really embraced it. I think a lot of Republicans after January 6th were hoping that he would create some distance between himself and that date. But since then, the former president has called those who stormed the Capitol rioters. He has vowed to pardon them.
Patriots.
And I called them patriots, excuse me. I had an opportunity to ask the former president about that recently. Take a look.
My question is on those rioters who assaulted officers.
You have to
would you pardon
what's
those
going to
people?
happen? Oh, absolutely, I would.
You would pardon
innocent,
those?
If they're innocent, I would pardon them.
They've been convicted.
And by the way, the Supreme Court just well, they were convicted by a very tough system.
Yeah, so to be clear there, the former president calls them patriots. He stands by his pledge to pardon those rioters, even those who have been convicted of assaulting police officers that day.
And look, for all that and all that we've discussed and all the chaos of the last several weeks in this campaign, this is essentially a tied race. Terry Moran, our senior national correspondent, has been tracking the polls and really, more importantly, Terry, what's behind the polls.
Absolutely, John. The whole country knows this is a close race. It's historically close in the modern history of polling. Take a look at the polling average. The 538 national polling average right there has Harris up by about 3 points. Look, that's within the margin of error, but her momentum from the last 3 weeks is basically stalling. The latest national poll underscores this very simple truth. It is close. The battleground states, take a look at this. It could hardly be any closer there. Harris leading in 5 of the battlegrounds, but very narrowly, all within the margin of error. And one thing to keep in mind tonight, nearly a third of likely voters in these polls, they're telling pollsters that they believe they need to know more about Kamala Harris. Look at that. Donald Trump is one of the most famous men in the world, one of the most famous people in the world. People know what they think about Donald Trump. Kamala Harris, there's 30%, almost 28% in that poll, who don't know enough. That's an opportunity for her, also a challenge. John, Martha?
No doubt. People know who Donald Trump is. Martha?
Okay, coming up, the opponents have been on the attack. Tonight, the candidates will now be confronted with the biggest issues online: the economy, immigration, abortion, crime, foreign policy, and more when we come back.
It was a regular day for 19-year-old Melissa Witt.
She went to meet her mom at a bowling church league, but she never makes it into the bowling alley. My gut knew this was not a young girl who just ran away.
New information, pools of blood were found by detectives.
I'd just love to have her back more than anything in the world.
It is a heart-wrenching day for the family of Melissa Witt.
Police found the body in the Ozark National Forest.
You had several suspects.
All these kinds of leads.
A known serial killer in your area.
Could he be involved?
We're actually finding key evidence that could have slipped through the cracks. You're looking for that game-changing piece.
Her last hours on this earth were probably the most horrific a person can experience.
This beautiful young girl. Police will find out what happened.
At Wit's End, The Hunt for a Killer, only on Hulu. What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
We are part of an operation.
Is this our combat operations center?
We're approaching the gate. Militants came in from different directions. Nuclear reactor. So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag...
Not a carry, innit?
How important it made the USA. Great work.
Hi. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Ismael?
David.
David.
I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
Watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast. Nightline, the stories that shape your world, that shape your life. Dramatic, stunning, empowering, jaw-dropping. The most powerful stories of our time. Nightline, on right after Kimmel and streaming on Hulu.
Baywatch is a fantasy.
When you hear that theme song, it was a wild time, and I was a wild chick. Jason Momoa exploded.
Carmen was a bombshell.
Pamela Anderson was an icon.
I'm really proud of everything I've done. Almost.
Baywatch was a whirlwind of epic highs and bitter lows.
Everyone likes to watch sexy things.
Betrayal is one of the hardest types of trauma to overcome.
This is her knight in shining armor.
Everything felt right. All of a sudden, I found this hidden folder. I opened it. I don't think I can say it. I'm sorry. It's shocking. My stomach just dropped. He just really didn't think I had it in me to do something. So I did.
Betrayal, A Father's Secret, the all-new season on Hulu.
Now streaming on Hulu.
I'm a rock and roll star. I'm not a saint. I'm John Bon Jovi.
John Bon Jovi, the new special, what you have not yet seen. John Bon Jovi with Michael Strahan. Now streaming on Hulu. ABC News, honored for excellence with 40 Emmy nominations. Mornings, evenings, late night, weekends, streaming 24/7. 40 Emmy nominations. Thank you for making ABC News America's #1 news. When it matters most, America turns to David Muir and ABC's World News Tonight.
Reporting from the Republican National Convention, I'm Lindsay Davis. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Welcome back. We're live at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia ahead of the first presidential debate. Both nominees will define themselves tonight and lay out to voters where they stand on major issues that affect us all. Number one among them, the economy. So let's bring in our chief economics correspondent, Rebecca Jarvis from New York, with where things stand after inflation reached a 40-year high in 2022. Rebecca?
Well, Martha, Trump's key advantage coming into tonight's debate is the economy. According to the latest numbers from Pew, 55% of voters say they are very or somewhat confident in Trump to make good decisions about economic policy, compared with 45% who say that about Harris. Harris has to walk a fine line tonight between owning the Biden economy while also differentiating her path forward. Inflation, as you just mentioned, Martha, it's come way down from that peak 9% to under 3% now. Wages are going up faster than prices today. Unemployment is 4.2%. That is historically very low. It is starting to tick higher, but it's still been incredibly low throughout this presidency for the most part. But people still feel sticker shock, and that is because prices are up substantially from 3 years ago. The typical family is now paying about $1,100 more a month today on the same goods and services as they were in January of 2021. Inflation is not just a problem here in the U.S. It is a worldwide issue since the pandemic. But Americans are looking to our next president to make the American dream achievable and the cost of living affordable, and that is what they want to hear tonight from the nominees. Who has that plan, Martha?
Thanks so much, Rebecca. It's something I hear from voters all over the country. That's what they want to talk about. That's what they want to hear. Kamala Harris knows that she is vulnerable on this.
Yeah, and she knows that this is top of mind for so many of those voters and that she is walking this fine line, as Rebecca described. She's proud of her record with Joe Biden, the Bidenomics record, but she knows she has to build on that and make clear to voters what she would do differently, how she would make a difference in their actual wallets. It's one of the few policy areas that she's gone into the most detail of so far. She knows that she has to continue to make that argument.
And Rachel, Donald Trump has just seized on this issue again and again, over and over.
Again and again, and for good reason, because you just heard from Rebecca there. This is the single most important issue to voters, and he does have an edge on Vice President Kamala Harris in poll after poll. It's a big reason why his advisors want him to focus on the issues tonight, not the attacks.
And the other issue where he has the huge advantage is the border security, immigration. So let's bring in Maria Villarreal down at the border in El Paso, Texas. Maria.
Well, you know, John, as of right now, we have seen the encounter numbers declining since June. That is when we saw President Biden come in with that executive order, basically shutting down the border between the ports of entry. A lot of agents, a lot of law enforcement that I've been speaking with along the border, they say as of right now, things are quiet and manageable. And then you add to that the tighter asylum restrictions and then the summer heat, and things are considerably different than what we saw in places like El Paso, where we're standing right now, in comparison to what we saw last year, right? The thing about immigration is it is an unknown for most of America, and that generates a lot of fear in people, which is why this has become a very hot topic. When we saw Trump on the border in Arizona a few weeks ago, he laid out part of his plan talking about tighter restrictions and penalties as part of what he wants to do if he's elected. On the other side of it, we haven't heard much from Harris when it comes to her immigration plan, other than she would try and resurrect that border security bill that was torpedoed right now. Listen, we have talked to voters. They want facts, they want policy, they want strategy. John?
And look, Trump's been taking a hard line on this issue for a long, long time, but an even harder line this time than when he first ran.
Yeah, he is vowing mass deportations. And in a recent interview, he suggested that he would even use the National Guard and even the military to target. We're talking about 15 million to 20 million people, possibly. The last government estimate was 11 million migrants, which he hasn't necessarily explained exactly how this would be carried out. But it is one of the campaign promises that he makes over and over again at every single rally, John.
And Kamala Harris defending her record. She's not the border czar. They call her the border czar.
Yeah,
But
and she knows tonight that she has to make clear to voters really what her role was here. She was not the border czar. She was never tasked with border security, as Trump has argued. She was put in charge of addressing the root causes of immigration. But it is certainly safe to say that they know this is a vulnerability for her. She is braced for those attacks to come tonight.
okay, another key issue, crime and safety, of course, top issue in the election. Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas has been tracking this for us. Pierre, joining us from D.C., Donald Trump has been slamming Democrats and Kamala Harris over the issue of violent crime, saying that it is way on the rise. What is the reality here?
John, here are the facts. Crime, particularly violent crime and gun violence, rose dramatically in Trump's final year in office. That increase continued in the first year of the Biden administration, but for the past 2 years, we've seen significant decreases, sometimes double-digit decreases in violent crime. Murder so far this year is down 17% in the nation's biggest cities. But no one's jumping for joy because gun violence is a chronic epidemic in this nation. And they're always flashing symbols that are painful reminders. And in just the past 7 days alone, we had a 14-year-old boy walk into a Georgia high school and allegedly kill 2 classmates and 2 teachers using an assault rifle. As we speak, there's a desperate manhunt in Kentucky to find the sniper who was shooting at people driving along a busy highway. These are all impacts on the way people actually feel, John.
Yeah, whatever the global stats are, people are concerned about crime. Martha?
And, of course, another key issue, abortion, Mary. And Kamala Harris looks at this as a very strong issue for the Democrats.
She has been out in front on this issue and hammering Donald Trump on this, blaming him, pointing the finger squarely at him, saying he is to blame for the tough new abortion restrictions sweeping the country. We have seen over and over again that she notes that he has bragged about appointing the Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe. She knows that polling shows this is a winning issue for her. And, of course, that every time that abortion access has been on the ballot since Roe was overturned, reproductive rights have won. They see this as an issue that they hope will drive voters to the polls in November, especially as Donald Trump has been really struggling to define his position.
And he really has struggled to define that position. He takes credit for helping to overturn Roe v. Wade, but otherwise not very specific.
He has been all over the map on this issue, but when you look at his record and what he has done, he has appointed 3 of the 5 Supreme Court justices that overturned Roe versus Wade. That cleared the way for 22 states to either ban or severely restrict access to abortion. But Trump has also said, even though he believes this should be a states issue, he believes some states have gone too far. He thinks the 6-week abortion ban in Florida, for instance, his home state, has gone too far. He didn't like that abortion ban that almost went into effect in Arizona. This is important for 2 reasons. As Mary mentioned, it's going to be on the ballot in a number of states, including several battleground states. And this issue has won every single time, even in conservative states. Second reason why this is important, Donald Trump is losing ground when it comes to likely female voters against Vice President Kamala Harris.
And a very, very important demographic. Coming up, both candidates hoping to make their case to voters in this critical debate, now less than 38 minutes away.
Hey, good morning, America. Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Are you ready? They are ready. Covering the biggest events in the country right now.
There's a lot going on here this morning. You don't just see it, you feel it.
I'm in.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
I'll be there.
I am here and so happy.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
Michael, George, Clara, Ginger.
Nightline. The stories that shape your world, that shape your life. Dramatic, stunning, empowering, jaw-dropping. The most powerful stories of our time. Nightline. On right after Kimmel and streaming on Hulu.
If you were coming of age in the 1980s, the Brat Pack was near the center of your cultural awareness. But for those of us experiencing it from the inside, the Brat Pack was something very different. If you could have the Brat Pack name not exist, would you? I hated the Brat Pack. What a disaster.
Why did we take it as an offense?
Andrew? I'm not going to say we were the Beatles or anything. Well, we didn't fill Shea Stadium.
1985, I think we could have.
What do so many people start their day here?
From ABC News, this is Start Here.
To be in the know and get a different take on the day's top stories.
A lot of news today, so let's get into it.
Listen now to the Daily News Podcast honored with 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards and see why the New York Times calls it a news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, ABC News. Make it your daily first listen.
Now, that's a part of the story I bet you didn't see coming.
Wherever you get your podcasts, start here.
Hey, good morning, America. Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Are you ready? They are ready. Covering the biggest events in the country right now.
There's a lot going on here this morning.
You don't just see it, you feel it.
I'm in.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
I'll be there.
I am here and so happy.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
Michael, George, Clara,
Ginger.
With so much at stake in our world right now, more Americans turn here to David than anywhere else. And now, America's most trusted, most watched newscast, ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir, is available to you on YouTube.
Baywatch is a fantasy.
When you hear that theme song, it was a wild time, and I was a wild chick. Jason Momoa exploded.
Carmen was a bombshell.
Pamela Anderson was an icon.
I'm really proud of everything I've done. Almost.
Baywatch was a whirlwind of epic highs and bitter lows.
Everyone likes to watch sexy things.
Here's to good mornings in America.
Can you feel the love?
Oh, yeah.
Mornings that inspire, filled with hope, kindness, joyous surprises, and so much fun.
This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy.
Start your day with Good Morning America's ray of sunshine, highlighting the best of America and helping
make dreams come true. Wow. I'm just so happy. It's so good.
Get ready to smile and put the good into your morning, America, because
You know what will make the morning better? A little ray of sunshine.
And welcome back. You are taking a live look right now at the Spin Room here in Philadelphia. Surrogates for each campaign will head there right after the debate, and more than 1,000 journalists will be there too. They are here covering the big night. The Latino vote will be influential this November. Latinos are now the second largest voting bloc in the country, with more than 36 million who will be able to vote in 2024. So let's bring in Maria Elena Salinas, who is in Miami for us. Maria, you have covered 10 elections. We know both campaigns trying to appeal to Latino voters in this final stretch.
Exactly. They are both trying very hard to get the Latino vote because it's so important, including in the battleground states. As of now, Kamala Harris is doing better than President Trump with Latino voters. You know, there are still 10 to 15% of Latinos that are considered persuadable, so they still can be convinced by either one. But there's about 30%, between 25 and 30% of Latinos that have traditionally voted Republican. They continue to do so, no matter who the candidate is. President Trump did improve those numbers in the last 2 elections, but Kamala Harris has also improved her numbers tremendously from Biden, from when before he dropped out of the race, but she still has not reached the amount of support that he had in 2020. So there's an opportunity for both Biden and for both Trump and Harris to capture the Latino vote.
Yeah, Harris is doing a lot better than President Biden was with this very key demographic. We were just talking about immigration, Maria. What about the views on immigration when it comes to these voters?
Well, for Latino voters, their views on immigration have shifted than they were in the last few elections. You know, now they support a more stricter laws, a more hardline approach toward immigration. And that is because usually the Democrats promised immigration reform, and Latinos were attracted to that promise, but that promise never materialized. Now they feel that the recent arrivals hurts not only their image, but they feel that it is unfair that they are getting paroled. Many of them are getting work permits, while there are still millions of undocumented people here living in this country that are either married to U.S. citizens or have children that are U.S. born, that have been waiting for decades, also the dreamers. And that's the one thing that I think that they need to take into consideration. One thing that might hurt President Trump is the mass deportations. Latinos are not in favor of mass deportations. Rachel?
Maria Elena Salinas, we so appreciate your time and your insights. Thank you so much for joining us. John?
All right, we are less than 30 minutes away from the first debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. When we come back, the global stakes in this most extraordinary moment.
It was a regular day for 19-year-old Melissa Witt.
She went to meet her mom at a bowling church league, but she never makes it into the bowling alley. Something terrible had happened to her. Melissa was a good kid. She had big dreams for her life.
And then she disappears.
My gut knew this was not a young girl who just took off and ran away.
New information into the disappearance of Melissa Witt. Pools of blood were found by detectives.
We were sick to our stomachs.
I'd just love to have her back more than anything in the world.
It is a heart-wrenching day for the family of 19-year-old Melissa Witt.
Police found the body in the Ozark National Forest.
You had several suspects.
All these kinds of leads. Who could have done this?
You have a known serial killer in your area.
Could he be involved?
Find the evidence, find the DNA profile.
We had to find that person. Time was of the essence.
Every blood spot matters. Every piece of DNA matters. You're looking for that game-changing piece.
We're actually finding key evidence that could have slipped through the cracks.
One of our guys says, you're going to see this.
There's another one.
What could be underneath these headstones? Her last hours on this earth were probably the most horrific a person can experience.
This beautiful young girl. Police will find out what happened.
At Wit's End, the hunt for a killer. Now streaming only on Hulu. You're watching America's #1 streaming news. Keep streaming with ABC News Live.
Betrayal is one of the hardest types of trauma to overcome.
This is her knight in shining armor.
Everything felt right. All of a sudden, I found this hidden folder. I opened it. I don't think I can say it. I'm sorry. It's shocking. My stomach just dropped. He just really didn't think I had it in me to do something. So I did.
Betrayal, A Father's Secret, the all-new season on Hulu.
Let's go. The ship is incredible. It feels like living in a science fiction movie.
We just saw what no one has seen before.
Wow, look at that.
Oh my gosh.
Well, dead ahead! Hang on!
We are heading into the unknown.
Hammer, hammer, hammer.
It doesn't get any more cutting edge than this.
Babe Ruth, Hank Aaron, Shohei Ohtani, legends of the game. But now the list of greats redefined. From ABC News, Reclaim the Forgotten League, a side of the story of baseball you have never heard before like this. The award-winning podcast is back. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or scan the QR codes you see here.
ABC News, honored for excellence with 40 Emmy nominations. Mornings, evenings, late night, weekends, streaming 24/7. 40 Emmy nominations. Thank you for making ABC News America's #1 news. You're watching America's #1 streaming news. Live reporting, breaking new exclusives. Keep streaming with ABC News Live.
Back now in Philadelphia, about 28 minutes until the debate begins, a debate the whole world is watching because the decisions the next president makes will have a profound effect on America's role in the world, from Ukraine to Russia and, of course, Israel. So let's start there with our Matt Gutman, who has spent months covering the conflict in the Middle East. And, Matt, I know this debate is being watched very closely there.
very closely, Martha, and a former longtime advisor for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu told me that he's going to be watching very closely for what former President Trump has to say about Iran. He said for Netanyahu, both Harris and Trump are known quantities, but the advisor telling me that for Netanyahu, a Trump presidency would be a dream come true, especially because of the mounting scrutiny that Netanyahu has been under, increasing allegations that he's been dragging his feet on this hostage deal and ceasefire, mounting even further after the release of that video showing the tunnel in which those 6 hostages were executed, including American Hersh Goldberg Pollen. That just a couple of hours ago. And if you ask Israelis and Palestinians what they're looking for from Vice President Harris, they're likely to say they want to know what she has to offer that is different from what the Biden administration has been doing the past several months. Despite massive efforts, they've promised that a deal is around the corner, but it remains elusive. And it's going to be a lot easier of a sell for the former president, who's never faced a crisis like this, but he's likely going to say and repeat what he said in the past, that if he were president, October 7th would never have happened. If he were president, he would have been able to have strong-armed Hamas and Netanyahu into a ceasefire and hostage deal that would have saved the lives of many Palestinians and, of course, those hostages, Martha.
A lot of challenges about that tonight for sure, Matt. Thanks so much. Ukraine also at the center of this. Let's bring in Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Ian Pannell, who is in Ukraine. Closely watched there as well, Ian.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I spoke to an advisor to the president's office today, and he used one simple word: critical. It's critical what happens tonight. It's critical what happens in November, not just to Ukraine, but I think this sends strong signals to other critical areas in terms of foreign policy for the United States, for example, China. And this war is just grinding on. I mean, overnight, Ukraine launching one of its biggest drone attacks on Russia since the start of this war. 20 drones were shot down the Moscow region, over 140 fired into Russia. An apartment block hit, a woman killed, and one of Moscow's airports was also struck. What we've seen is Ukraine repeatedly trying to target Russia in an attempt to try and bring the war home to the Kremlin and to the Russian people. And this is partly because they've been given restrictions on the weapons that have been supplied by the United States and others. And what Ukraine is hoping is that those restrictions are going to be lifted. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is going to come here to Kyiv this week. Speaking in London, he confirmed that Iran has now transferred ballistic missiles to Russia. He's expecting that those are going to be used in the coming weeks. He describes this also as a critical moment for Ukraine. So all eyes are going to be on tonight's presidential debate. Even apparently President Zelensky expected to tune in. And the outcome, I think, of this presidential debate is going to be critical to the outcome of Ukraine's defense against Russia's invasion. Martha?
Okay. Thanks so much, Ian. And Ian and I have both spent a great deal of time in Afghanistan, John, as you know, and that will be a key issue tonight. Former President Trump has been slamming the Biden-Harris administration for that disastrous withdrawal, the way it was done in Afghanistan.
Hey, look, let's say it bluntly. It was a dark moment for the Biden campaign, for the Biden presidency. It might be the darkest moment of his presidency. In fact, the Republicans have now given the Congressional Medal of Honor, not the Medal of Honor. They announced
Medal of Freedom, Congressional Medal of Freedom. Yes.
To the 13 service members who died at Abbey Gate in Afghanistan. And one thing, if you look at that moment, so that withdrawal from Afghanistan happened in August of 2021. The other thing that happened in August of 2021 was that Joe Biden became an unpopular president. His popularity, his favorability ratings went below 50%. They never came back.
But Joe Biden was also at the time saying this would not be like Saigon. We also saw those images of that. It's hard to play that down. If you're the president, it's hard to call that a success. And Mary, let's go back to Israel and Gaza, a key issue also for Kamala Harris, and a very, very fine line she has to walk.
A very fine line, and this is one of those rare issues where she is taking a notably different tone from the president. She has been much more forceful in speaking out about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, stressing, yes, of course, Israel has a right to defend itself, but saying Palestinians also have the right to dignity, security, and freedom. Now, policy-wise, she is largely vowing to continue the policies of the Biden administration, but there is no question on this issue, she is facing the most pressure from Democratic voters. I've been at nearly every Harris rally so far, and at almost every one, she is interrupted by protesters eager to make their voices heard on it. They will be listening closely.
Very strong voting bloc there, too. Rachel?
Yeah, they're going to be listening to that message. All right, so coming up, Senator Tom Cotton and Governor Josh Shapiro are standing by with just about 20 minutes until the debate. Stay with us.
Why do so many people start their day here?
From ABC News, this is Start Here.
To be in the know and get a different take on the day's top stories.
A lot of news today, so let's get into it.
Listen now to the Daily News Podcast honored with 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards and see why the New York Times calls it a news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, ABC News. Make it your daily first listen.
Now, that's a part of the story I bet you didn't see coming.
Wherever you get your podcasts, Start Here.
Baywatch is a fantasy.
Baywatch was sexy. Baywatch was the #1 show in the world. It was hot. When you hear that theme song,
I had no idea how much fun I was going to have.
It was addicting. People were just hungry. They were eating that stuff alive.
it was a wild time, and I was a wild chick.
Everyone tuned in to watch the show because you knew you were going to see someone sexy.
I mean, everybody was pretty.
Not just white women can look hot and sexy. Anyone can do it.
Jason Momoa exploded off of Baywatch.
Carmen was a bombshell who had something to say.
Pamela Anderson was an icon.
Pamela was this sweet girl from Canada who came to get the American dream.
I'm really proud of everything I've done. Almost.
Baywatch was a whirlwind of epic highs and bitter lows.
It was a lot of pressure. They had to wear next to nothing. You want me to wear this? What?
He with the best abs wins, or she with the best boobs wins.
They just wanted to put you under a microscope and see where your flaws are.
Everybody was disposable, and if you didn't fit into their brand, you were gone.
Baywatch empowered me. Every now and then it hurt me. But so do the people and the things we love. I need to take a break, okay?
Greed and lust, fame.
It's crazy.
It changed everything.
It was about pushing the envelope.
Iconic. So hot.
Everyone likes to watch sexy things.
What's good to watch, read? Where can I get a great deal on what I'm just dying to buy? Oh, it's all right here. GMA Life. Get the latest celebrity buzz, deals and steals, and the coolest lifestyle tips from GMA.
I love that so much.
Streaming weekends on ABC News Live.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
We're still in a flash flood warning.
To catch you up with what happened overnight, clashing over national security,
What's happening today? Tensions in the Middle East.
what people are talking about, the worries on Wall Street,
Fast, straightforward.
with some fun in between. Catching up on sleep during the weekend could be good for your heart.
Non-alcoholic bars are popping up in a growing number of cities. That's the spirit.
America This Morning
America's #1 early morning news.
on ABC News Live.
More Americans choose ABC News, America's #1 news source.
And there you see the debate stage here in Philadelphia. The debate now less than 20 minutes away. And we are joined on behalf of the Trump campaign by Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. Senator Cotton, thanks a lot for being. We only have a couple minutes. This debate's about to get underway. But I wanted to ask you, which Donald Trump do you think is going to show up tonight? You know him well. Is it going to be the Donald Trump that is going to be making personal attacks, insulting Kamala Harris, or is it going to be the Donald Trump that's going to focus on his issues?
John, I think you're going to see the Donald Trump who's president for 4 years, who has a clear record. This campaign is unusual. We don't have a candidate running for office for the first time. The American people remember what it was like under President Trump. We had stable prices, rising wages, a secure border, and peaceful, stable relations around the world. Under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, we've had record high inflation. We've had a wide open border. We've had war breaking out everywhere. The American people are going to remember after tonight that times were good under Donald Trump, and they want another 4 years of President Trump back in the White House.
And we noticed he was spending a lot of time looking at the angles, studying the debate stage. He does know the television of this as well.
Well, he does, but I think the style and the debate stage and the lighting and all that is going to be secondary in the minds of most voters, especially those trying to make up their minds to what they hear from the two candidates about their record. People remember that with Donald Trump, they had good times. They had rising wages. They had stable prices. We had peace and stability. And with Kamala Harris, a dangerous San Francisco liberal, and Joe Biden in the White House, we've had none of that. So I think it's going to be a clear contrast between President Trump and Kamala Harris tonight, and the American people, starting tonight and over the next 8 weeks, are going to make the decision that they want President Trump back in the White House.
All right, there's Senator Cotton with one side of this debate, very sharply worded. Mary, the other side.
For the other side now, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro joins us, of course, a key surrogate for the Harris campaign. You heard Senator Cotton there. He says that voters know who Donald Trump is. You've seen the polling. A large slice of voters say they simply don't know enough about the vice president. Is this her last best chance to reach out to those critical voters, show them who she really is, what she stands for?
Look, I'm not sure what world Senator Cotton was living in, but when Donald Trump was in charge, the only thing we had more of in this country was more chaos. And I think under Kamala Harris, you're going to see someone who's compassionate, who cares deeply about the welfare of all Americans, no matter what they look like, where they come from, who they love, who they pray to. An economic message that lifts people up instead of shutting out the middle class. I expect you'll see Kamala Harris speak not only about her strong track record, but her strong vision for the nation and prosecute the case effectively against Donald Trump tonight.
You mentioned the case against Trump. What about Joe Biden? How does she go about building off of their record, but making clear to voters who are concerned that she won't just be Biden 2.0?
Well, serving as Joe Biden's vice president made her fit and ready to serve on day one. I think it's important that we examine Kamala Harris's positions, her vision, the things she wants to do for this nation. Elections are about the future, and Kamala Harris's vision for the future is a stark contrast to the dangerous vision of the future that Donald Trump has, one of less freedom and more chaos under Donald Trump.
We will see how it unfolds on the debate stage. Governor Shapiro, thank you so much.
All right, so we've talked to surrogates from both campaigns. Coming up, we are going to talk to somebody who has both debated Donald Trump and helped him prepare for big debates, with tonight's showdown less than 14 minutes away.
This is Impact by Nightline.
Are you kidding me?
My sense was that everybody around him was afraid of him.
Brittany describes having a secret abortion that not even her family knew about.
What's going on with Kate?
What is the relationship like between Harry and William today?
What did people start to say?
You look great. Are you on Ozempic?
I told the kids, I said, I'm not even gonna let you eat breakfast until you get your chores done.
She talks about tough love and harsh punishment.
No, it's abuse.
I think Scott Peterson murdered his wife and his child. Proved me wrong.
Do you feel the church accepted abuse?
Yep, that's him.
Yep.
Ready? Does your church protect sexual predators?
How do you top the most watched season yet?
Fabulous.
It's a bit erotic, a bit exotic.
You have no idea.
Impact by Nightline. The all-new season premieres this September, only on Hulu.
Whenever, wherever news breaks, it's so important to always remember that lives are changed. Here in London, in Buffalo, Uvalde, Texas, Edinburgh, Scotland. Reporting from Rolling Fork, Mississippi. Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw. We're heading to a small community outside of Mexico City. Getting you behind the stories as they happen. ABC News Live Prime. We'll take you there.
Stream ABC News Live weeknights wherever you stream your news. Only on ABC News Live.
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
We're still in a flash flood warning. To catch you up with what happened overnight. Clashing over national security.
What's happening today? Tensions in the Middle East.
What people are talking about. The worries on Wall Street.
Fast, straightforward.
With some fun in between. Catching up on sleep during the weekend could be good for your heart.
Non-alcoholic bars are popping up in a growing number of cities. That's the spirit.
America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
On ABC News Live.
If you were coming of age in the 1980s, the Brat Pack was near the center of your cultural awareness. But for those of us experiencing it from the inside, the Brat Pack was something very different.
The critics agree.
Hated the Brat Pack. What a disaster.
Why did we take it as an offense?
I mean, I'm not going to say we were the Beatles or anything.
Well, we didn't fill Shea Stadium.
1985? I think we could have.
Betrayal is one of the hardest types of trauma to overcome.
This is her knight in shining armor.
Everything felt right. All of a sudden, I found this hidden folder. I opened it. I don't think I can say it. I'm sorry. It's shocking. My stomach just dropped. He just really didn't think I had it in me to do something. So I did.
Betrayal, A Father's Secret, the all-new season on Hulu.
More Americans choose ABC News, America's #1 news source.
Here's to Good Mornings in America. Mornings that inspire, filled with hope, kindness, joyous surprises, and so much fun. Start your day with Good Morning America's Ray of Sunshine, highlighting the best of America. Get ready to smile and put the good into your morning, America.
You know what will make the morning better? A little ray of sunshine.
Reporting from the 2024 Democratic National Convention in Chicago, I'm Kira Phillips. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, I'm Martha Raddatz. We're live from Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center, the site of tonight's debate, now about 10 minutes away.
And I'm Jonathan Karl here with Mary Bruce and Rachel Scott. The candidates are just off the stage, ready to walk out. They are in their hold rooms, just minutes from making that walk. Martha, you have been backstage at this moment. What's it like?
Well, it's stressful, but it's also that time you just say, this is go time. You get in your zone. I'm sure the nominees, the candidates right now are thinking the same thing. They've studied. They're going to go out, open the curtain.
All right, well, then let's bring somebody in who has been there both debating Donald Trump and helping him prepare for general election debates, the former governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie. So Chris, you've helped prepare Trump for this moment several times. He says he doesn't prepare, but he actually does. Bring us into that room right now. What's going on with Donald Trump?
Well, look, at this point, he's in the worst hour of his prep, because you just have to sit there and wait for the time to come, and they make you get there early. And so he is there. He's not really being spoken to. You know, a little small talk here and there, but nobody's trying to give him any kind of clues.
So let me ask you the question. Let me ask you the question I tried to ask Tom Cotton. He didn't exactly give me an answer, but you will. Which Trump is going to show up tonight? You know what I mean by that. Which Trump?
I think at the beginning of the debate, the Trump who will show up will be the calmer Donald Trump. He knows inherently after the 2020 first debate against Joe Biden that the other Donald Trump is not the one that's a winning formula. The question's going to be, will he be able to continue to maintain that approach through questioning by David and Lindsey and through any comments that Vice President Harris makes in his direction? And that'll be the key to how he performs tonight.
And you and I were talking, you helped prepare him for those 2016 debates against Hillary Clinton. He told you that he had respect for Hillary Clinton, that Hillary Clinton was smart as you were preparing. What about Kamala Harris? We hear not the same.
Well, certainly he's not saying that publicly in any way. And I can tell you that in 2016, he would regularly say during the many debate prep sessions that we had with him that Hillary Clinton was smart, that she was a good debater, that she was not to be taken lightly. And I don't think there was ever a moment in 2016 where he took her lightly. I do think he took Joe Biden lightly in 2020. And clearly during the prep sessions that I had with him, it was very, very difficult to get him to focus on what Joe Biden might or might not do in that first debate. And I think his performance in part reflected that. So the question's going to be, Is what he's saying publicly what he really believes? We know that often with Donald Trump, that's performance. But I will tell you that in his 2016 prep, he was serious about getting ready for Hillary Clinton. In his 2020 debate prep, he was completely unserious about getting ready for Joe Biden. I think performances in both those debates reflected that approach.
All right, Chris Christie, you'll be watching with us. Martha?
And we have about 6 minutes left before the debate, so let's bring in Donna Brazile, formerly of the DNC, and Reince Priebus, the RNC. Welcome to both of you. And Donna, let's start with you. You have said that Kamala Harris has to own the future, but she also has to own the past. So how does she do this?
It's quite easy. Because I do believe that in talking about the future, you draw from your past. You draw from your past experiences. She draws from how she was raised, the values that was instilled in her as a young lady. Look, she is steady on her feet, still in her resolve, and tonight she should talk to the American people, sit in their living rooms, go to their kitchen table and say, look, I have some ideas that I want to share with you. There's so much that we have done together over the last 4 years, but here's what I think we can do together over the next 4 years. Be positive in her approach and really remind the American people that we don't want to go back to the chaos and the confusion, the disaster that made, of course, the American people go out in droves in 2020 to fire the former president. Say, I want to be a president that lead all Americans. I want to keep us strong and secure, and here's the plan that I want to share with you tonight.
And Donna, I of course meant Biden. She has to own up to the Biden administration's any mistakes they made too, and Donald Trump is going to go after her on that.
You know, Martha, they made mistakes. Donald Trump and Mr. Pence made mistakes. But you know what? If we focus on our mistakes, we won't focus on all of the good things that we could do together as Americans. I do believe there's something to say about people who are now able to work. The people who can buy their insulin without paying over $1,000, $35. There's so much good that she can talk about from the visits that she's made to small towns across this country, large cities across the country. Bring us together. The American people want to be led into the future, not dragged back to another era.
And Reince, I want your thoughts on, you've also prepped Donald Trump for debates back in 2016, I believe. What Donald Trump do you think we'll see tonight? Can he be disciplined about talking about policies and what kind of president he will be?
Well, he certainly can be. I mean, the reality is Donald Trump doesn't have a lot to lose tonight. I mean, his support has always been almost unmovable. So the second piece is the honeymoon, I think, is over for Kamala Harris. And you all kind of touched on it with Donna. Kamala Harris has to answer for the state of the economy that she took a role in the Biden administration, the border, you know, her past positions on decriminalizing the border, decriminalizing certain drugs, what her role was in Afghanistan. So really, the spotlight is on Kamala Harris tonight because she played a role in the Biden administration. She wants to act like she's not an incumbent. So this is where the focus is going to be. And she's got a lot to answer for tonight. And I think that's where Donald Trump's focus will be and where it actually should be tonight.
Well, one of the things he wants to do is have female voters look at him. How does he attract female voters after saying things about Kamala Harris? And we'll see how he pronounces that tonight. Things he said about Kamala Harris, that she's dumb as a rock. That's not really going to attract female voters, is it?
Yeah, no, it won't. But I also think that just like he did in the first debate against Joe Biden, I think the formula here is to constantly tie Kamala Harris to the Biden administration, which is where Trump is winning against her on the economy, inflation, and all these other problems that we're having, and then sit back and let her talk. Let her explain herself, her past positions, current positions. How does she feel about how Biden has done on the economy? How does she feel about the border? Then turn it over and let her talk.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us tonight, Donna and Reince. We're all staying tuned. Can't wait.
And I have to say, as we are just less than 2 minutes away, this is such an extraordinary moment, and especially, Rachel, when you consider that these two people that have been the center of our lives for the last 2 months have never met each other.
Have never even met each other. And Harris said, if you got something to say it to my face. The question tonight, does Donald Trump actually go there? He's questioned her racial identity. He's questioned her intelligence as well. Or does he stick to the issues?
Look, this is the largest audience they're likely going to have in this race. It will be interesting to see if Harris can make clear the stark choice before voters. And where does she decide to land her punches? She can punch hard. Can she do that while rising above the needling coming her way? But first and foremost, are we going to see a handshake when the two of them meet for the first time?
We didn't back in 2016 when I did that debate. We'll stand by to see that tonight. But the first time, side to side, together.
And I have my doubts that we're going to see that handshake, but what we are going to see is a spirited debate and perhaps the most consequential general election debate we have ever seen, because almost certainly going to be the last one. So with the stakes so high, the presidential debate just moments away, we have the entire news division keeping an eye on everything. We are going to be fact-checking on our live blog. It's all going to be happening right here. The debate now just 10 seconds away, and we will be back with our post-game show as soon as it's over. We are going to toss it right now to David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Tonight, the high-stakes showdown here in Philadelphia between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. Their first face-to-face meeting in this presidential election, their first face-to-face meeting ever.
A historic race for president upended just weeks ago. President Biden withdrawing after his last debate. Donald Trump now up against a new opponent.
The candidates separated by the smallest of margins, essentially tied in the polls nationally and in the key battlegrounds, including right here in Pennsylvania, all still very much in play. The ABC News presidential debate starts right now.
This is an ABC News special, the most consequential moment of this campaign. Kamala Harris.
Together, we will chart a new way forward.
Donald Trump.
We will soon be a great nation again.
Face to face, historic. The ABC News presidential debate. Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid. And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing. And the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that Xi and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad. But it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. we had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce-back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back, and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out. when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. "Thank you, President Xi," exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21, that's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, "I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks." But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to your desk?
Well, I won't have to because, again, 2 things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government, and we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's the problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
Under Roe v. Wade,
Answer the question, would you veto?
You could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside, and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from television.
But the people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. And all over the world, crime is down. All over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice President Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear, where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris.
him.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation
We do have a lot
that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your response?
First of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a lot of
These are not good
issues
things
that
for
we
the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, well, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just ask you.
David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask you.
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi. But I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, The president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I said that sarcastically. You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said there was no
we didn't have standing.
Fraud.
That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The President of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it, I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I
up.
think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror, and they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it, because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approved the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe, because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
The ABC News presidential debate will continue after this.
It was a regular day for 19-year-old Melissa Witt.
She went to meet her mom at a bowling church league, but she never makes it into the bowling alley. My gut knew this was not a young girl who just ran away.
New information, pools of blood were found by detectives.
I just love to have her back more than anything in the world.
It is a heart-wrenching day for the family of Melissa Witt.
Police found the body in the Ozark National Forest.
You had several suspects.
All these kinds of leads.
A known serial killer in your area. Could he be involved?
We're actually finding key evidence that could have slipped through the cracks. You're looking for that game-changing piece.
Her last hours on this earth were probably the most horrific a person can experience.
This beautiful young girl. Police will find out what happened.
At Wit's End, the hunt for a killer, only on Hulu.
Baywatch is a fantasy. When you hear that theme song, it was a wild time, and I was a wild chick.
Jason Momoa exploded.
Carmen was a bombshell.
Pamela Anderson was an icon.
I'm really proud of everything I've done. Almost.
Baywatch was a whirlwind of epic highs and bitter lows.
Everyone likes to watch sexy things.
You're 24. He's 54.
Yeah. It just seemed like I had met my soulmate.
You fired 4 times.
Friday, 2020 is all new.
The 32-year-old former ballerina.
The center of the so-called Black Swan trial.
Here we go. You haven't spoken out before. Why did you decide to talk now?
The stunning all-new 2020 premieres Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
Hey, good morning, America. Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Are you ready? They are ready. Covering the biggest events in the country right now.
There's a lot going on here this morning. You don't just see it, you feel it.
I'm in.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
I'll be here.
I am here and so happy.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
Michael, George, Clara, Ginger.
This is Impact by Nightline.
Are you kidding me?
My sense was that everybody around him was afraid of him.
Brittany describes having a secret abortion that not even her family knew about.
What's going on with Kate?
What is the relationship like between Harry and William today?
What did people start to say?
You look great. Are you on Ozempic?
I told the kids, I said, I'm not even gonna let you eat breakfast until you get your chores done.
She talks about tough love and harsh punishment.
No, it's abuse.
I think Scott Peterson murdered his wife and his child. Prove me wrong.
Do you feel the church accepted abuse?
Yep, that's him.
Yep.
Ready? Does your church protect sexual predators?
How do you top the most watched season yet?
Fabulous.
It's a bit erotic, a bit exotic.
You have no idea.
Impact by Nightline. The all-new season premieres this September, only on Hulu.
Let's go.
We are heading into the unknown.
Oh my gosh.
We just saw what no one has seen before.
Hammer, hammer, hammer.
It doesn't get any more cutting edge than this.
Reporting from outside Wembley Stadium, surrounded by Swifties as Taylor Swift is set to kick off 5 sold-out concerts. I'm Maggie Rulli. You're streaming ABC News Live.
What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
We are part of
of an operation.
Is this our combat operations center?
We're approaching the gate. Militants came in from...
Hi. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Ismail? David.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast. You're watching America's #1 streaming news. Keep streaming with ABC News Live. Live from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back to this historic ABC News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for $250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here...
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interests for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also, as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you. Otherwise, we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm asking...
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said, going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5. They admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up,
I
Lindsay.
want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President Trump, we have to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
Thank
That's
you, Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
no, the
President
former
Trump.
president has said
No, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I just need
going to move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this
multiple
is now
times.
your
Yes.
3rd time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare.
Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Correct. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it, and we're going to replace it. But remember this. I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not-too-distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run health care system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
In terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to give. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
The ABC News presidential debate will continue after this.
Baywatch is a fantasy.
Baywatch was sexy. Baywatch was the #1 show in the world. When you hear that theme song,
I had no idea how much fun I was going to have. It was addicting. People were just eating that stuff alive.
it was a wild time, and I was a wild chick.
Jason Momoa exploded.
Carmen was a bombshell.
Pamela Anderson was an icon.
Pamela was this sweet girl from Canada who came to get the American dream.
I'm really proud of everything I've done. Almost.
Baywatch was a whirlwind of epic highs and bitter lows.
It was a lot of pressure.
Everybody was disposable, and if you didn't fit into their brand, you were gone.
Greed and lust, fame.
Everyone likes to watch sexy things. Betrayal is one of the hardest types of trauma to overcome.
This is her knight in shining armor.
Everything felt right. All of a sudden, I found this hidden folder. I opened it. I don't think I can say it. I'm sorry. It's shocking. My stomach just dropped. He just really didn't think I had it in me to do something. So I did.
Betrayal, A Father's Secret, the all-new season on Hulu.
You're 24. He's 54.
Yeah. It just seemed like I had met my soulmate.
You fired 4 times.
Friday, 2020 is all new.
The 32-year-old former ballerina,
the center of the so-called Black Swan trial.
Here we go. You haven't spoken out before. Why did you decide to talk now?
The stunning all-new 2020 premieres Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC. Nominations, mornings, evenings, late night, weekends, streaming 24/7, 40 Emmy nominations. Thank you for making ABC News America's #1 news.
Get ready, America, every Friday.
The hottest trends, styles, and must-have. What's the right stuff to buy right now? I really love that. It's time to buy the right stuff.
Yes!
And save big time, too.
The right stuff.
Fridays on GMA. You're gonna love it.
This is Impact by Nightline.
Are you kidding me?
My sense was that everybody around him was afraid of him.
Brittany describes having a secret abortion that not even her family knew about.
What's going on with Kate?
What is the relationship like between Harry and William today?
What did people start to say?
You look great. Are you on Ozempic?
I told the kids, I said, I'm not even gonna let you eat breakfast until you get your chores done.
She talks about tough love and harsh punishment.
No, it's abuse.
I think Scott Peterson murdered his wife and his child. Prove me wrong.
Do you feel the church accepted abuse?
Yep, that's him.
Ready? Does your church protect sexual predators?
How do you top the most watched season yet?
Fabulous.
It's a bit erratic, a bit exotic. You have no idea.
Impact by Nightline. The all-new season premieres this September, only on Hulu.
If you were coming of age in the 1980s, the Brat Pack was near the center of your cultural awareness. But for those of us experiencing it from the inside, the Brat Pack was something very different. If you could have the Brat Pack name not exist, would you? I hated the Brat Pack. What a disaster.
Why did we take it as an offense?
Andrew?
I'm not going to say we were the Beatles or anything. Well, we didn't fill Shea Stadium. 1985? I think we could have.
Let's go.
We are heading into the unknown.
Oh, my gosh.
We just saw what no one has seen before.
Well, dead ahead! Tag on!
Hammer, hammer, hammer.
It doesn't get any more cutting edge than this.
Reporting from the floor of the Republican National Convention, I'm Rachel Scott. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Live from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
Thank you. And we are here live on ABC with our post-debate comments. I'm Martha Raddatz. It was a lively debate from the economy to abortion to Afghanistan. They had it all, and it was historic, John Karl, fiery.
Wow. 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 That was quite a debate. And I'm Jonathan Karl here with, of course, Mary Bruce and Rachel Scott. Our reporters across the news division have been updating our live blog, looking at some of the allegations made back and forth, doing fact checks. You can find all of that on abcnews.com. But I would like to replay the moment at the very start of this debate because it was quite a moment. The handshake. And if you look,
Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Have fun.
Thank you.
I mean, quite a moment. First of all, because we hadn't seen a handshake. We hadn't seen a handshake in a long time.
And she initiated that one.
And
yes, she did.
I mean, not only did she initiate it, she walked over to him and sought him out, put the hands out, and also made the first words.
And probably had a plan if he hadn't put his hand out either.
Interesting. So more at the bottom line, what did you think?
I think clearly what Kamala Harris wanted to do was be the candidate of hope, the candidate of the future. Donald Trump seemed angry within 4 minutes. I think we saw him going from very serious at the beginning, never really seemed to look at her, to just angry. I mean, really yelling at some points, trying to make his points. I don't think we heard a lot of policy and plans on either side of that, despite those questions over and over again. But what you had was that optic. You had Kamala Harris looking over baiting him again and again and again. The microphones were muted when they weren't speaking, but many times she didn't need a microphone. You watch Donald Trump get mad and scowl through things. And, you know, John, we were all talking leading up to this about how this would go, what Donald Trump you would see. I think he had a plan for talking about what he saw as a next term, but then he was talking about rumors about people eating their neighbors' pets. So it really devolved into that.
I mean, look, Kamala Harris didn't really explain some of the big questions that were out there about why she changed her policy views on so many things. Part of the reason is Donald Trump really was not effective in bringing the debate to her. I agree with you. I think that he looked not just angry, but also rattled. And in contrast, Harris, who, again, much of the world doesn't know, Harris looked like she belonged on the stage, looked like she is somebody that could serve as president.
And that is certainly how the campaign is feeling tonight. I can tell you, the Harris campaign feels very good. They feel they had a very strong night, that she was in command, that she did look presidential, and that she was able, they feel, to hold Donald Trump accountable for his actions. And of course, that was their goal going into this, that she would be able to put Donald Trump's record under a microscope. And they feel that the strongest example of that was that exchange on abortion, where she was able really to blame Donald Trump directly to his face. I mean, she said, what you are putting women through is unconscionable. Yes, she goaded him. She flat out trolled him many times, got him off message, but she also talked directly to voters, even inviting them to a Trump rally to underscore that central argument in her campaign that she says he's only out for himself, that she argues she's out for the American people.
Rachel?
Yeah, well, look, the Trump campaign is going to be seizing on the fact that Vice President Kamala Harris did not do a great job today really explaining her policy shifts, right? And that is what they have been seizing on. They're really trying to define her for voters when voters have a lot of questions about her policy positions. At the same time, though, almost every single thing that Vice President Kamala Harris said tonight got under Trump's skin. And that is exactly what his allies and his advisors did not want to see. I could tell you, I do not think that part of Donald Trump's debate prep was people eating dogs in Springfield or comparing rally sizes. They wanted him to stay focused on the issues, especially the ones that he has an edge on: Harris, economy and immigration.
I mean, you want to get under Donald Trump's skin, you question the people at his rallies. And that was something else. Martha, you have?
I have with us right now Governor Tim Walz, of course, the Democratic vice presidential candidate. Welcome, Governor Walz. How are you feeling? What's your reaction to the debate tonight?
Martha, I'm feeling great because what I knew, and I think so many knew, and now many Americans know, is you saw a president for all America in Kamala Harris. You saw the confidence, you saw the vision, you saw the poise, and you saw the compassion for people, understanding she spoke about an economy that moves us forward, moves all of us forward, lets everybody be a part of it. And she continued to lay that out, whether it's reproductive freedom or how we start small businesses or making home ownership easier. And on the other side, you saw a nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump, angry, unhinged, and as you've been discussing, talking about things that are deeply concerning because they make no impact on the American public. He shouldn't be anywhere near the White House. And I have to tell you, if it weren't so dangerous, it reminds you of an old man yelling at the clouds. That was his thing. Get off my yard. That's what he did all night. Contrast that with the poise of Harris laying out the question for everyone that matters. So I think the whole country can see what happened tonight. We'll keep pushing forward. That's the way that the country wants to see our politics be. She laid it out clearly. Donald Trump brought nothing tonight. Anger, resentment.
Governor Walz, I do want to ask you, she did not answer questions on abortion restriction. She never really answered that question. Can you clear that up, where the Harris-Walz ticket stands on that?
Certainly, and you couldn't get any different than this. The reinstitution of Roe versus Wade, what was the law of the land for 52 years. You saw this in there, and him pushing back to the states, she's exactly right. It's people like Amanda in Texas, which everybody saw on the stage in Chicago, nearly bleeding out, having sepsis twice because she can't get the care. She's been absolutely clear on this. Everything Donald Trump said, that is untrue. The clarity of this is Roe. When you have Roe, you have the protections in place where women make their own decisions with their health care providers, not Donald Trump.
Okay, thanks so very much for joining us, Governor Walz. John?
And we have the other side of the ticket. We have Senator J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's running mate, joining us now. Senator Vance, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.
So I want to get to one part in the debate where you came up. Donald Trump was asked if he would veto a national abortion ban. He didn't answer the question, suggested, I guess, that he wouldn't. And then it was pointed out that you, in fact, said not that long ago that he would veto a national abortion ban. Can you explain the mix-up here?
Well, I think the president's been very clear that he doesn't want a national abortion ban. I think in some ways he finds the question a little bit ridiculous because why are we asking him about legislation that's never going to actually happen and why he would veto it or not veto it when he says very explicitly that he doesn't support a national abortion ban and he wants these policies to be made by the states. But I think there's a deeper and more important issue here in this debate, which is that you had Kamala Harris effectively echoing platitude after platitude after platitude. The American people can't pay their grocery bills on platitudes. They can't put their kids in a house on platitudes. And Kamala Harris had a lot to say, but very little actual substance behind it for how she's going to lower grocery prices, secure the border, and make housing more affordable in this country. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She can't run on her record, and she apparently can't run on much of her plans either because it's just a lot of slogans and not a whole lot of substance.
But Senator Vance, why won't he just say that he would veto the national abortion ban? And by the way, had you spoken to him about it before you were put in a position to answer that question?
No, I hadn't spoken to him about it because, again, Donald Trump thinks the question is absurd because he doesn't support a national abortion ban, and he's been explicit about it. And, John, I think that it's so preposterous for the media to focus so much on an issue where Donald Trump has been crystal clear and not on the fact that people can't afford groceries and housing because of Kamala Harris's policies. This election is actually quite simple, and Kamala Harris and apparently the media would like to distract Americans on issues, by the way, that Donald Trump's been crystal clear about, but they're not talking nearly enough. This debate didn't talk nearly enough about the fact that Americans are struggling because they can't afford groceries, they can't afford housing, and a lot of their kids are dying of fentanyl overdoses because Kamala Harris has let the Mexican drug cartels take over the southern border. This is a disgrace, Senator, what's going on in our country, John, and we could do so much better if we just had better leadership. We've got the best workers, the most beautiful country, the best natural resources, but Kamala Harris's leadership is squandering the great benefits of this country. It's why we've got to get back to Donald Trump's leadership.
Senator, by the way, I asked because he hadn't been crystal clear and he said something different than what you said. That's why I was seeking clarification. But let me ask you about this just very quickly. I heard Donald Trump before this debate describe Kamala Harris as, I'll just read a few of them, a low IQ individual, somebody who doesn't have the mental capacity to be president, really dumb, unable to put two sentences together. Is that what you saw on the stage tonight?
John, what I saw was a lot of slogans. I think the American people are smart, and Kamala Harris talks to them like they're children. She repeats these ridiculous platitudes where if you actually think about what she said, you realize that it doesn't make any sense. She talks a lot about her plans, but then her plans, when you analyze the substance, don't make any sense. And more importantly, John, the American people don't get fed on plans. She has been the vice president for 3.5 years. What she can't do, refuses to do, and has no ability to do is to say, I accomplished lower prices because she didn't, or I accomplished lower housing prices because she didn't, or I secured the southern border because she didn't do that. She has failed as vice president, and the fundamental question is, do we want to give her a promotion? I think the answer has to be no, John.
All right, Senator Vance, thank you for joining us. Mary.
One thing both sides can agree on, this was a consequential night in this race. More reaction when we come back. Stay with us.
You're 24. He's 54.
Yeah. It just seemed like I had met my soulmate.
You fired 4 times.
Friday, 2020 is all new.
The 32-year-old former ballerina, the center of the so-called Black Swan trial.
Here we go. You haven't spoken out before. Why did you decide to talk now?
The stunning all-new 2020 premieres Friday at 9, 8 Central on ABC.
Hey, good morning, America. Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Are you ready? They are ready. Covering the biggest events in the country right now.
There's a lot going on here this morning. You don't just see it, you feel it.
I'm in.
I'm in.
I'm in too. I'll be here.
I am here and so happy.
I'm in.
I'm in too. Michael, George, Claire, Ginger.
Baywatch is a fantasy. When you hear that theme song, it was a wild time, and I was a wild chick.
Jason Momoa exploded.
Carmen was a bombshell.
Pamela Anderson was an icon.
I'm really proud of everything I've done. Almost.
Baywatch was a whirlwind of epic highs and bitter lows.
Everyone likes to watch sexy things.
Let's go. The ship is incredible. It feels like living in a science fiction movie.
We just saw what no one has seen before.
Wow, look at that.
Oh my gosh.
Well, dead ahead. Tag on!
We are heading into the unknown.
Hammer, hammer, hammer. It doesn't get any more cutting edge than this.
What's good to watch, read? Where can I get a great deal on what I'm just dying to buy? Oh, it's all right here. GMA Life. All the exclusive and buzziest celebrity good stuff. Deals and steals with amazing savings and the coolest lifestyle tips from Good Morning America.
I love that so much.
GMA Life. Streaming weekends on ABC News Live. Your weekend just got a little better with GMA Life.
Traveling with the president in Paris, I'm Mary Bruce. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Let's go. The ship is incredible. It feels like living in a science fiction movie.
We just saw what no one has seen before.
Wow, look at that.
Oh my gosh.
Well, dead ahead. Tag on!
We are heading into the unknown.
Hammer, hammer, hammer. It doesn't get any more cutting edge than this.
It was a regular day for 19-year-old Melissa Witt.
Something terrible had happened to her.
We had several suspects.
All these kinds of leads.
A known serial killer in your area. Could he be involved?
We're actually finding key evidence that could have slipped through the cracks.
Her last hours on this earth were horrific.
This beautiful young girl. Police will find out what happened.
At Wit's End, The Hunt for a Killer, only on Hulu.
We're back now here at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia and with Chris Christie. So, Governor Christie, you heard the debate. Remarkable debate. Bottom line, what'd you think?
She was exquisitely well prepared. She laid traps, and he chased every rabbit down every hole instead of talking about the things that he should have been talking about. This is the difference between someone who's well prepared and someone who's unprepared. Whoever did debate prep for Donald Trump should be fired. He was not good tonight at all. And what Harris did was what she had to do, which was to prove that she belonged on that stage. She has a voice that wants to try to unite the country. And Donald Trump spent more time talking about people eating pets, people at his rallies, and whether he had more or less than he did about the economy. And that is a huge fail tonight. I think what we're going to see is that Kamala Harris is now being seen by a lot of voters as a potential president. That's what she needed to accomplish tonight. Trump better get to work or he's going to lose this election.
Characteristically blunt assessment from Governor Chris Christie. Thank you, Governor. Mary?
All right, let's go to former DNC Chair Donna Brazile. So, Donna, you have certainly studied many a debate in your career. How does this one compare?
I think it was one of the best debate performances I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen a lot, and I've helped a lot of people prepare for these big moments. She met the moment. She seized the opportunity to tell the American people what she would do during her 4 years. She commanded the issues, and she did not allow the former president to bait her. Instead, she led the way forward. She turned the page, and I think this race is about to get even more interesting now.
We will see if it moves the needle, Donna. Thank you.
All right, over to the other side now. Former RNC Chair Reince Priebus. All right, Reince, the Harris campaign says they want another debate. If you were advising the Trump campaign, would you tell them to do it?
Sure, I would tell him to do it. And the reason is like I said before, Donald Trump's numbers just don't move. I mean, the reality tonight, I know Donna's excited, but the truth is Kamala Harris didn't address the most important thing that the American people care about, which is the economy and the cost of living. She had no answers on immigration. She had no answers when she was asked about defunding the police. She had nothing to say about the families that were lost in Afghanistan, which was a true layup. She should have been fact-checked a lot more on some of the things she said in regard to this comment about a bloodbath, which was about the auto industry. So, look, I think a lot of things were not said tonight that she needed to say in order to move the numbers. And I don't think Donald Trump's numbers move at all. They haven't moved at all for months.
Reince Priebus, Donna Brazile, both thank you for your time.
All right. Well, I got to say, again, what a incredible debate, consequential debate, no doubt. I don't know how many votes will actually be moved. I don't know how many persuadable voters are actually out there. But Kamala Harris had a chance here to introduce herself to the country, to people who know who she is but don't know where she stands. Now, you could debate how much she did in terms of the specifics of where she stands, but she stood up there, and I think it was very significant to hear Chris Christie say that she acted like she seemed like she belonged.
Exactly, and Chris was clearly impressed with that. But to your point, John, what matters is what the voters think. Kamala Harris was hurling things against Donald Trump, and he's been convicted, and January 6th and everything else she could throw at him. But in the end, right now, he is tied with Kamala Harris. Does this change anything? We've all seen debates where people are very proud of what they did. Hillary Clinton thought she won that debate, many debates in 2016, and she didn't win. So you have to be very careful, and it's very important to see what the voters think.
And look, the Harris campaign certainly thinks that they were, they put him on the defensive. They are going to keep getting out and making this message. She's going to be out there in those critical battlegrounds again later this week. They're so optimistic. They want that second debate. As Rachel said, the message from the campaign tonight, Vice President Harris is ready for a second debate. They're looking for one in October. They say, is Donald Trump, ? One last goading of him to end the night.
Wow, that is something else. I did not predict that at the beginning. Rachel.
Bottom line, voters out there want a change. That's what the polls say. And both of these candidates really trying to present themselves as the agent of change. We will have to see in the polls who did the most effective job of doing that tonight.
We will see. All right, that is it for us here in Philadelphia. A night to remember for sure. Our race for the White House post-debate coverage continues on ABC News Live, Disney+, Hulu, and anywhere else you stream live news. And your local news is next.
And thank you so much for joining us on this special edition of ABC News Live, the race for the White House. I'm Whit Johnson. We are live from the spin room here in Philadelphia. You can see all the people gathering and the spin that's going on behind me after that historic face-off between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. A pivotal night in a historically close presidential race. It started with a handshake and a nice to see you, but then the candidates held nothing back. Take a look.
She was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute, I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
For 90 minutes, highlighting their vast differences on everything from America's involvement in foreign wars to abortion rights and immigration. The former president promising to strengthen the economy, while Harris offered a vision for a less divided country.
We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other.
And I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger.
Our polls showing the race still neck and neck within the margin of error, including in the battleground states. But the question on many people's minds right now is who won the night on this first and likely last face-off in the race for president. We have live team coverage from the National Constitution Center and here in the spin room. We begin with our Jay O'Brien covering it all.
Kamala Harris.
Tonight, the historic face-off. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump going head-to-head.
in their first and what will likely be their only debate before Election Day.
If she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. She has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window.
I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies. What you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you.
Trump lashing out.
She's been so bad, it's so ridiculous.
Trump in his 7th presidential debate, Harris her first.
I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace.
The candidates clashing on major issues like the economy.
Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America.
I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy.
Abortion.
And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. She said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote.
And immigration.
I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings.
They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. And all over the world, crime is down. All over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof.
Harris mentioning Trump's legal woes, including 4 felony indictments and 1 conviction.
I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing.
Trump doubling down on his lies that he won the 2020 election.
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically. You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically.
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that.
Their differences stark, making their pitches in a race that poll after poll show is neck and neck.
The President of the United States is commander-in-chief, and the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation.
Plenty of big moments in the debate tonight. So joining us now is former Congressman Cedric Richmond, who's now co-chair for the Harris-Walz campaign. Mr. Richmond, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Heading into tonight's debate, the polls were showing that Kamala Harris still needed to tell her story, that voters wanted to know more about her and the issues and where she stood on the positions that matter to the voters. How do you think she did tonight?
Well, I think rightfully so. I think voters deserve to know the candidates that they're voting for. And I think she did an excellent job tonight talking about not only her values, but talking about her plan for the American people. And I think that was the big difference tonight. She focused on how do I help Americans dealing with several challenges, the challenges of child care, the challenges of affordable housing, the challenges of rising grocery prices. And I think she addressed all of that. And I think the American people are giving her a fresh look, and I think she did an excellent job.
Donald Trump, the former president, says that she's a flip-flopper. She can't be trusted because her issues have evolved so much over the years. Do you think that she properly addressed that tonight?
Absolutely. I think that she hit it direct on and talked about, for example, with fracking in healthcare. She said she wouldn't ban fracking as vice president. She didn't ban fracking, and she has no intention on banning fracking. When she talked about healthcare, she said her values was always that healthcare should be a right and not a privilege just for the rich. And she talked about how to expand healthcare. So I think she did a very good job of going into her policies and how they align with her values as growing up in a middle-class family, and how that relates to the families in the United States right now.
Another thing heading into tonight, the polls showed that voters, for the most part, trusted Trump more on some key issues like immigration and the economy. Kamala Harris did not answer the question right off the top of whether Americans are better now than they were 4 years ago before Joe Biden took office. Is that going to be a continued problem for her?
4 years ago, 50% of the schools in this country were closed. You had thousands.
Because of the pandemic.
But 50% of the schools in this country were closed. 10 million people were out of work. You had businesses shut down. And now you have a resurgence, 16 million jobs created, schools open. So I think what the vice president was doing, and she did a good job of doing, was articulating where we started, where we are now, and what her plans and how it would chart a new way forward. And I think she did a good job of that.
I want to go ahead and take a listen to a clip here that we prepared. This is the candidates talking about each other's policies. Let's take a listen.
I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat.
So that's, again, to that same narrative here, the Trump team trying to define her. Do you believe, are you confident that she is able to change this narrative going forward? Clearly, the voters still want to know more about her. They want to know where she stands. Do you think that she's going to be able to do that in the days and weeks ahead?
Yeah, I think she did a great job of it tonight. And part of what a debate is, it's a compare and contrast. And I think that she talked about our values, and I think he talked about himself. He's still stuck thinking he won the 2020 election. In fact, that was the lowest point on the dials when he still rehashed that he won the election in 2020. Her highest point on the dial is when she talked about she was going to be a president for all of America, that she was going to work hard to improve the quality of life of everybody in this country. And I think that she did a great job tonight, and she's willing to keep doing it, and she's going to keep showing people who she is, and who she's fighting for, and that's the American people.
Former Congressman Cedric Richmond, thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Let's turn now to our senior congressional correspondent, Rachel Scott, who is joining us right now. And Rachel, obviously, you've been on the campaign trail. You've been talking about the Trump campaign and the Harris campaign. One of the big issues, and there was a significant moment tonight, was the topic of abortion. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
One does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body.
So, Rachel, forgive me, a lot going on here in the spin room, but your takeaway on what we just heard right there, I know people with the Harris campaign are saying that that was a strong moment for her.
Yeah, it looks awfully busy in that spin room behind you, but I know a lot of those surrogates there for the Harris campaign and for the Trump campaign are going to be getting questions about this because this is going to be a critical defining issue in this election. Look, abortion rights could be on the ballot in as many as 12 states, including several key battlegrounds. And this is why you have Harris, who has been the leading voice on this issue for the Biden administration, really taking it to the former president, who has been sort of all over the map on where he stands. Look, his record is clear. He appointed 3 of the 5 Supreme Court justices that overturned Roe versus Wade. At the same time today, when he was pressed on his stance, even what his own running mate has said, that he would veto a national abortion ban, you heard the former president not even committing to that. And so Harris does see this as a very effective line of attack, especially when you look at the polls. She still has that double-digit edge, especially in those battleground states among likely female voters.
And one of the areas where former President Trump has struggled is connecting to those women voters, especially those who are undecided. What is the sense, how is the Trump campaign responding to how he did on that tonight?
Yeah, well, the former president's campaign insists that Harris essentially didn't necessarily go into a lot of detail about her policy positions. They continue to insist that they're doing very well among likely female voters, but they also know, Whit, that this is an area that the former president has to do some work on ahead of November. And it's a reason why you are seeing the former president really turn his focus, as he tried to say in the debate tonight, toward things like IVF. And him saying that he wants the government to provide free IVF to women in this country. It's a reason why he's trying to turn the page and focus more on women's issues, because he knows that he's behind in the polls compared to Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, whether or not he did an effective job at laying that all out tonight, I think that remains to be seen. I still think that tonight the former president drifted into a lot of areas that his advisors and allies just did not want him to go into. They wanted him to stay on message. They didn't want this whole back and forth over rallies and crowd size or people who are allegedly eating pets in Ohio. They wanted him to really focus on the issues with.
All right, Rachel Scott, we're going to talk more about that right now. We appreciate it. Thank you. We're going to bring in Senator Marco Rubio from Florida. And that question, Marco, we're going to pick it up right there. We've heard from advisors and Trump campaign officials going into tonight that they were hoping that the former president would stay on the issues and stay on message. Do you believe that he accomplished that? How would you rate him tonight?
First of all, I think that Donald Trump has been running for president since 2016. He has been president. Americans have lived under the Trump presidency. He's well defined on these things. And a lot of things he said tonight, it's part of the persona. And so I think if he hadn't done some of those things, people would be watching and saying, oh, that's a different Donald Trump. It's not the same guy. I think the person with the onus tonight was Kamala Harris, who's still not very well known. And I think tonight what you take away from it and everything she says and in the days to come, what I think a lot of voters, real voters, not political pundits, not people like me, just people that are out there in the real world watching this that are going to be voting, that aren't daily political people, they're taking away from it. We don't know a lot about her. And tonight we found out she either basically is the same as Joe Biden on public policy, or even potentially farther to the left, given her positions in 2019 and 2020, when she wanted to pay for the transgender surgeries of illegal migrants in detention, when she was raising money to bail out rioters. A lot of people didn't know she was doing that, where she wanted to defund ICE. Or she's just like Don. And by the way, one of the most outrageous moments tonight, she stood there and basically touted what happened in Afghanistan as a success. That it was a great success. It was a humiliation. It was a disaster. It was not a withdrawal. It was a retreat, and a costly retreat. It cost 13 American lives, cost our national prestige.
She tried to put it back on the Trump campaign in the sense that these were dates that were previously established and negotiated by the Trump administration.
If that's what she said, that's a lie. Because there was no dates that said the Taliban runs you out. What happened there basically was the Taliban forced the Afghan government that she was bragging about, it just collapsed. They just abandoned their posts. They ran us out of the country. They gave us 72 hours to get out, and we had to leave behind $90 billion worth of equipment that they were just parading around the other day. That was not a part of any Trump plan. That most certainly was not part. That was a result of the collapse of that government due to the malfeasance, malpractice of the State Department and the Department of Defense. Not a single person's been fired for it. Everybody sees it for the humiliation that it was, even Democrats. And she's bragging about it as a great success. But there's a lot more to unpack here. Tonight, for the first time, that 25% of Americans that say they wanted to learn more about her, they're beginning to learn that, in fact, she was not born on July 24th of this year. She was vice president. She's been there when 50% increases happened in our groceries bill. She's been in the White House when over 10 million people have entered this country unlawfully over the last 3.5 years.
Can I ask you about immigration?
Yeah.
Obviously, this is something that you've spoken about, and so has the former president. Polls show that Americans, voters, at least right now, trust former President Trump more on the issue of abortion. But does it help his case when he comes out?
Immigration.
On immigration, forgive me. On immigration. But does it help his case when he comes out and talks about things like, migrants kidnapping and eating pets in Ohio? Does that help his case?
People, listen, I don't know if that's true or not true. And what he said tonight was that there are people out there putting that on social media.
Government officials have told us that.
The city manager said they had no reports of it. But there are actual people, real people who are claiming this, and that it's happening in Springfield, Ohio. That's had like an influx of 15 or 20 million migrants brought here under this parole program. And that's claims that people are making, and that's what he's pointing to. But irrespective of that, beyond it, the people, I was just in Ohio last week, and people were talking about Springfield, and what they were saying is it has been a real burden on, I mean, that same city manager, I believe, was the one that came out and said, we have a housing crisis because they flooded our community with people that were brought in under the Biden parole program. The Biden immigration program has been a complete and absolute disaster. It has led to 9 or 10 million people coming into this country unlawfully, including people they claim they vetted that turn out to be members of a very violent Venezuelan gang that is now terrorizing New York City, Chicago, parts of Florida, and Aurora, Colorado, as was pointed out tonight. She has to answer for that. She's been there when all this was happening. Why didn't they do anything about it? I was disappointed, frankly, that she was not pressed more on that, on the record of the last 3.5 years. She has not been some bystander. She has been in the White House, the second most powerful figure in this administration, when all these terrible things have happened to our country. She should have been forced to answer more for that. That said, I think that tonight those issues, the President Trump effectively raised those issues in the minds of a lot of undecided voters who I think are going to begin to take that into account as they fill in the blanks of who she is.
What about the issue of election integrity? Trump, again, tonight would not acknowledge the results of the 2020 election. He also, when asked multiple times if he had any regrets about January 6th, didn't answer that question. Is that going to be a problem for him?
Well, I think what he said about January 6th was that he's not responsible for what happened that evening.
You don't think he bears any responsibility for?
I believe in individual agency. I think there were a lot of people that went to Washington to protest, and there were a handful of crazies that went in to do something they shouldn't have done. And among those, there were people that were violent and people that committed crimes. And the ones who committed violent crimes, those people should serve their sentences if you committed an act of violence. But I don't think that they did it. Donald Trump didn't tell them to go do it, and that's what he has said. I do think, on the other hand, we have to ask Democrats, what about these people that were out there excusing the rioters that were burning down American cities, some of whom weren't even prosecuted?
Do you have confidence that this is going to be a free and fair election, and that there will be a...
Yeah, listen, free and fair elections is one thing, but people have to have confidence in the process. For example, in the state of Georgia, they entered into a consent decree. They ignored their own laws because they entered into a consent decree and allowed a court to change their laws and how you're allowed to vote and when and what method and so forth. And when you do that in multiple places, including here in the Commonwealth, that undermines people's confidence, especially in a close election. That's why election laws are so important. That's why they need to be followed. It's not just about getting the count right. It's about conducting an election in a way that gives everybody confidence that nothing happened that shouldn't have happened. And that didn't happen in 2020 because COVID caused a lot of states to try to create flexibility that didn't exist in statute.
But the investigations never found any examples of widespread fraud.
But it's almost impossible to find widespread fraud. But that's not the claim I've ever made. The claim is that they have not followed their own laws. And when you don't follow your own laws of election, you open the door to fraud. But more importantly, you open the door to a lack of confidence in your electoral process. When you say these are the rules and then you violate those rules, you are undermining people's confidence in the election, especially when one side comes up short by a very narrow margin. That's why election laws are so important, to protect people's confidence in the elections. That's why they're so important, and they weren't followed in 2020 in multiple jurisdictions.
All right, Senator Rubio, thank you for that. We appreciate it. Let's go ahead and head over to our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, who's been talking to both campaigns. Mary, your thoughts on what we've been hearing so far from the Harris campaign?
Well, look, they certainly are absolutely thrilled with how this night turned out. They think that Kamala Harris was out there looking presidential, that she was in command, and that they feel she did, shine a spotlight on Donald Trump's record, that she was able to articulate her positions and pivot and get under Trump's skin. And look, there's no question she did successfully goad him in many instances, and they feel that she was really successful at that she threw Donald Trump off message. And it does appear, is that Donald Trump there going into the spin room, perhaps, making an entrance there as well? Whit, I know you'll keep an eye on that. Let me know if you need to turn there. But, one of the things that's so interesting is looking ahead now. Where does the Kamala Harris team go? Because so much of this comes down to whether, they can spin this how they want. Trump's team can spin this how he wants. But what it comes down to are those key independent voters. Harris is going to be out there in those key battleground states in the coming days. And they feel this was so successful. They are now asking for a second debate in October, challenging Trump to see if he will accept that debate. Maybe you can shout that question to him there, Whit. And in a final, sort of top off the night here, Taylor Swift tweeting out to her 283 million followers that she is now endorsing Kamala Harris. With that is going to be something that's hard for Trump to shake off.
Hey, Mary, forgive me. Former President Donald Trump is here in the spin room. Whenever there's an audience, we know that the former president likes to be part of it, so he has essentially taken over. And there is a scramble here on the spin room floor. Let's go to Jay O'Brien. I think you're right there in the middle of it. Jay, what's going on?
Wait, Donald Trump has just walked into the spin room here. He's walking here. Mr. Trump, we're live on ABC News here, sir.
Mr. Trump.
Mr. Trump. I think he's about to talk. Wait, here we go.
So we thought it was our best debate ever. It was my best debate ever, I think. And it was very interesting. It showed how weak they are, how pathetic they are, and what they're doing to destroy our country and the border with foreign trade, with everything. And I think it was the best debate I've ever personally that I've had. We're getting polls that show 92 to 6, 88 to 11. We're having a lot of great polls that just came out. They're polls, I guess, phone polls and lots of other polls, but you see the polls. A very important debate. Now, she wants to do another one because she got beaten tonight, but I don't know if we're going to do another one. I wouldn't mind.
Did she get into your head tonight, sir?
The polls are indicating that we got 90%, 60%, 72%, 71%, and 89%. So the polls are very good. But beyond the polls, I felt very good. I had a good time doing it. I hate to speak about our country so negatively, but that's what happened. They've ruined our country. They've destroyed our country. So I hope you're all having a good time. But it was a very interesting evening. Yeah, go ahead.
If you're so confident you won tonight, why are you here? Why not let the performance speak for itself?
Well, I think it did. But people said, would I come here? And I made an obligation to a couple of people that I'm going to do their show. But it was I thought it was a great night.
Mr. President, you talked to...
I have no idea.
Mr. President, when Republicans are complaining about moderators, does that mean that it wasn't a good night? Were you not prepared?
No, I thought the moderators were very unfair, but it basically was 3-on-1. But I thought they were very unfair, the moderators. Everybody did. But despite that, they're saying that the debate was a big
Were you prepared for that kind of debate?
Yeah, I assume the moderators would be bad because that right there is the worst of all the news networks, in my opinion, and it always has been. Yeah.
Why won't you commit to a second debate with Kamala Harris
if you believe? A second debate because she lost tonight very badly. So they immediately called for a second debate because they lost. So we'll think about that. But she immediately called for a second. Look, we're looking at polls. We're looking at polls. The worst poll that we've had was 71 that I see, 71% to like 24 or 25%. Well, we'll look at it. But
all right, Whit. So if you still have me, he's walked a little bit away from our camera. Now he's at the edge there. You won't be able to hear him well. But one of the things you did hear was a question just asked by our Catherine Faulders asking, why not commit to another debate if you believe that you won? He said he believes he won this debate. But then he was also asked, why be here in the spin room spinning about this debate if it's a debate that you believe was a clean win? We're going to try to get you as close as we can to Donald Trump. But I don't think you're going to be able to hear. Let me try to get my mic in there and see if you can hear Whit if you're still going through my camera here.
Yeah, we're listening. Let's see what we can hear.
I thought it was my best debate. I had great debates. I thought this was my best debate. Well, I thought she was not very good tonight. She didn't protect the vice president. He's the office of the vice president. And certainly, if you take a look at it, she was terrible with respect to the president. She's trying to get herself away from Biden, and she wasn't able to do that tonight. I think it was a big thing. They wanted to disassociate with Biden, and they weren't able to do it. What did you think about that?
Mr. President! Mr. President!
What have I done? Project 2025. Yeah, I have nothing to do with Project 2025.
What did you think of the moderators' facts that you used throughout the debate?
Well, I think the moderators were very unfair. I actually thought they were just average.
All right. So if I could just tell you what we're seeing, because it's probably still hard to hear him. Donald Trump has entered the spin room. He's gaggled with reporters. He came over to our camera just a few moments ago, and now he's walked over to the corner there to another section of the gaggle here. It's hard to see him. I'm going to try to keep the camera on Donald Trump as much as we can, although there's a sea of heads to get in here. Here he comes, Whit. Hold on. Mr. President, over here, Mr. President. He's going over there.
Andrea's got him.
So if you can see, that's the back of his head. He's walked into the spin room. This was an unannounced visit, Whit. He has said numerous things about the debate, the top line being that he believes that he won. He talked about polls that we're not certain of where they exactly came from as showing him up in the race. But point being is Donald Trump has made this unscheduled appearance here to the spin room to say that he won, but he got asked the question, why be here in the spin room if you believe this was a clean win? And he didn't really fully answer that.
All right, Jay, forgive me as we're following everything. Former President Trump right there in the spin room. We are going to step away from this just for a second. We'll come back if anything happens. But we want to talk to our Republican and Democratic strategists, Reince Priebus and Donna Brazile, to get their reaction to everything that's happening. I'm sure there's no surprise to you that he came here to the spin room, wanted to take over and be the center of the floor. But Donna Brazile, let's start with you because obviously this was a big moment for both candidates, a pivotal moment. Donald Trump says that he won the debate and that Kamala Harris lost badly. How do you see it tonight?
Once again, the President of the United States, the former president, is once again just making it up as he go along. Look, I've never seen a candidate walk into a spin room to try to control the conversation when he fumbled, when he wasn't able to deliver. He ran it. He went back to his rally notes. He had nothing to offer the American people. And even when he got a second bite at the apple, something he didn't even deserve in the conversation, he brought us back to his dangerous, distorted realm of being. It was pitiful to watch him. Look, I thought the vice president gave a solid performance. She showed the American people tonight that she has the vision to lead this country. She wants to unite this country. She talked about lowering costs. She talked about what they are doing now and what she plans to do in the future. So I think the vice president should be proud of her performance tonight. She knows she has a lot of work to do. She got to get more people, to rally and to support her candidacy. But you see the former president out there trying to get the media to pay attention to him. The vice president say, let's pay attention to the American people. They deserve better.
Let's bring in Reince Priebus because Reince, earlier this evening when we were talking before the debate, the recommendation that you gave her, the advice that you said that you would give the former president was for him to not take the bait and to stay focused on the issues. There were a few moments there when Kamala Harris was able to get under his skin, specifically when she was talking about crowd sizes and things like that. How do you think the former president did?
Well, I think she did get under his skin a few times. I mean, it's obvious. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think Donald Trump's numbers change at all. And I think the big mistake that Kamala Harris made is she didn't address head on the biggest issue in the race, which is the economy, the cost of living. She had nothing to say on immigration. She had no answer when she was asked about defunding the police. She had nothing to say about the families that were lost in Afghanistan. So I think those are opportunities lost. I do think that the President Trump anyway, closed very well when he said, look, you work in the White House every day and you talk about the things that you want to do. Why don't you do the things now that you work in the White House? And so I thought that was a strong ending. Whether or not anyone was moved tonight is another story, because I don't think Trump's numbers move, and I actually don't think Kamala Harris addressed the most important issues in the race. Getting Trump mad about crowd sizes and all these other things, it's not going to move any voters at all.
Reince Priebus, Donna Brazile, thank you so much. We appreciate it. All right, we do want to bring in Tulsi Gabbard, former Congresswoman and Trump campaign advisor. She is joining us here in the spin room. And Tulsi, it's good to see you.
Thank you.
You have a unique perspective here because not only have you debated against Kamala Harris, but you were once a Democrat. Now you support former President Trump, and you helped him with some of his debate prep. How do you think the evening went, and did you see some of the things that you discussed before the debate play out in real time tonight?
You know, President Trump kept this debate very focused on the issues that matter most to the American people. And I think, to me, when you look at this debate, that was the biggest contrast, is that President Trump really brought voice to the American people who are concerned about crime on their streets, who are concerned about illegal immigrants, millions of illegal immigrants crossing the border, and how this doesn't just affect the border communities. This is affecting, in a very negative way, communities all across the country. He kept coming back to these issues. He kept coming back to the economy and how more and more Americans are continuing to struggle to afford basic necessities, groceries, gas, supplies, things that they are reminded of every single day, that their dollar is going shorter and shorter. It doesn't go as far as it used to be. These are the issues that the American people are most concerned about, and quite frankly, that Kamala Harris not only didn't really speak to or address, but she also didn't recognize and admit the fact that people are in this position today given the Biden-Harris administration's policies, and that they have been the ones in the White House these past 4 years, not Donald Trump.
So you talked about immigration and the economy. Those are two issues that voters have trusted, at least in the polling shows they trust Trump a bit more. But one area where he's been vulnerable has been abortion. And we heard from Nikki Haley earlier. She suggested that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance need to change the way they speak about women. Tonight, there were some heated exchanges over the issue of abortion. Trump himself has struggled to sort of define where he stands right now. How do you think he handled that part of the debate?
I think he clarified and told the truth about a lot of things that Kamala Harris accused him of that were outright lies. She was trying to tell the American people that he supports a federal abortion ban. He does not. She tried to tell the American people that he's trying to ban IVF, something that's personal to me because it's something that my husband and I, for years, tried to start our own family through the use of IVF. It didn't work out for us, works out for a lot of families. President Trump was quick on the draw when that Alabama court ruled, and he immediately said, no, we have to protect IVF, and the Alabama state legislature took action. She continued to say things. She's trying to say he's trying to ban birth control. That is also 100% false. So President Trump, I think, did a good job in clarifying the truth after Kamala Harris continued to lob lie after lie at him, saying things that he stood for that frankly just are not true.
Well, the former president made some false claims, too. He said that, there were states that wanted to kill babies after they were born. We fact-checked that a bunch of times, even prior to the debate. There is not a single state in this country that would allow that sort of thing. But I want to ask you about something else. He also made a pretty serious allegation saying that he took a bullet to the head because of the way Democrats, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, have been talking about him, saying that he's a threat to democracy. You're a former Democrat. Do you think that Democrats are to blame, at least in part, for that assassination attempt? And remember, the FBI says they don't know what the motive was in that attack.
There is no doubt in my mind that those who use such insightful rhetoric as calling Donald Trump the same as our modern-day Hitler, not once, not twice, but year after year after year after year, it doesn't take it shouldn't take an FBI investigator to add 1 + 1 = 2. People always say, well, what would you have done if you were in a position where you could have stopped Hitler back during World War II? To think that any person watching them call Donald Trump today's modern-day Hitler wouldn't take it upon themselves to say, hey, maybe I should be that hero to go and take out this man who these people I see on television, who these powerful people in Washington are saying is our modern-day Hitler, then you're not actually living in the real world. There are consequences to using that dangerous, insightful rhetoric, and it would not surprise me to know that it would lead to that very dangerous and tragic situation.
Former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard.
Thanks,
Thank you for your time.
Nice to talk to you.
Appreciate it. Nice to talk to you. Let's head out to, we're going to talk more on the issue of immigration right now. Go to ABC News contributor Maria Elena Salinas and ABC News national correspondent Maria Villarreal, who is at the border in El Paso right now. Thank you both for being here. We appreciate it. So from the start of the debate here, former President Trump attacked the Biden administration's policies on immigration. Let's take a listen to at least some of those exchanges.
They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous.
Maria, let's start with you because we heard Trump there repeating some claims about a flood of people coming from prisons, jails, mental institutions, stealing American jobs. What should voters know about these claims?
You know, Whit, listen, we talked about this in the pre-show, that this would be his fallback because he feels very confident when he talks about immigration, very supported. But there is some issue, some concern with this because a lot of what he talks about are spins on exactly what the truth might be. So, for example, yes, we've had some record numbers during the Biden administration of encounters with migrants at the border. However, that does not mean that they are coming from mental health institutions and prisons. In fact, there are no facts that actually prove that statement that he has continued to say. Some other points that definitely stuck out to me. Again, we've heard a lot of people referencing the comment he made from Ohio and how migrants are stealing pets and eating them. Again, we've had a number of people fact check that, and it is not true. I mean, and then the biggest one for us is when he talks about the influence of the presidential election and how migrants are being shipped to the United States in order for them to vote. Look, it is very clear there are laws on the books that say already that you have to be a U.S. citizen in order to vote. If you vote illegally, you will go to jail. So those laws are already in the books. So yes, while we did hear Trump talk a lot about immigration, we didn't really hear a lot of truth here. On the other side of it, Whit, I do want to point out that every time Kamala Harris was asked about immigration, we didn't hear what voters have continued to say they need. They wanted policy, they wanted facts, they wanted strategy for the future. I just don't think that we heard that from either candidate tonight on this particular issue, which is very big for voters.
And Maria Elena, let's bring you into this conversation. Recent polls suggest voters do trust Donald Trump over Kamala Harris on the issue of immigration. We've talked about that. Did Vice President Harris do an effective job outlining how her policies would be different from Biden's? She's trying to walk a fine line here, being a supportive vice president while also being a candidate that she says about the future.
Right. Vice President Harris did not really talk much about immigration other than to accuse former President Trump of killing the bipartisan bill by convincing Republicans to simply not vote for it or not put it out on the floor. And what she did say was that she would sign that bipartisan bill once it was approved by Congress and would turn it into law. Of course, this is a bill that would limit the amount of migrants that could enter the country and put more agents at the border. But let me just say that it seemed as if President Trump is running on demonizing immigrants and creating fear that they are criminals, killing Americans and eating cats and dogs, like Mireya mentioned. But on the issues that Latinos really care about most, the economy, the high cost of housing, she did spell out what she would do to improve living conditions, at least somewhat. And former President Trump, on the other hand, didn't really give any specifics other than saying that the economy under him would be bigger and better and that he would impose tariffs on foreign countries. So when it comes to the issues that Latino voters care about, there seem to be more specifics from VP Harris than from former President Trump. I think a lot of Latino voters out there would have liked to hear more on what Kamala Harris plans to do, and if she really is going to implement that double approach, which is tough on the border, but at the same time, be humane when it comes to immigrants that are already living in this country and have families. So that, I think, part is pending.
We'll stand by to hear more as the campaign continues. Maria Elena Salinas and Maria Villarreal, thanks to you both. And as we mentioned earlier, the economy, of course, one of the major points of interest for tonight's debate. So here to discuss more on that and how the candidates did on that issue, Elizabeth Schulze is joining us. So, Elizabeth, what answers on the economy specifically stood out to you the most?
Well, and Whit, the very first question of the debate was on the economy. Vice President Harris was asked if she believes Americans are better off now than they were 4 years ago. And frankly, as you pointed out, she didn't answer the question. She instead pivoted to talk about, in broad brushstrokes, some of the policies that she's highlighting: small business tax credits, down payment assistance for home buyers, an expanded child tax credit. Notably, some of the policies she highlighted on the economy front, Whit, were distinct from what we've seen under President Biden. She is really really trying to distance herself in some ways from President Biden's economic record, because we know that this has been a liability for the Biden administration. At times, we did see former President Trump attack the Biden administration, and including Vice President Harris's record on the economy. He also doubled down on his plan for more tariffs. But I was also struck with that former President Trump did not go after Vice President Harris more on the issue of inflation. This is one that we know he leads on, he has an edge on, and at times he started going there, but then got sidetracked by some of those personal attacks. When you talk to voters, what they want to know is the answer to that question. They want to answer, are they better off financially now than they were 4 years ago? And will they be better off in 4 years too?
And Elizabeth, also, we mentioned that ABC News Ipsos polling earlier that said that voters trusted Donald Trump's ability to handle the economy more than they did for Vice President Harris. How would you grade each of them making their cases today? I mean, you gave us a little bit of a breakdown there, but specifically, I think a lot of voters wanted and were eager for more specifics. Did we get that tonight?
If we're trying to give a grade on specifics from either candidate, we did not get that at all. Poor, even failing grade on the policy specific front. In fact, much more of this was about presenting this vision from the for the future from both sides. So we heard Vice President Harris talk about the opportunity economy. She didn't get into a lot of the details about how some of those proposals, for example, would be paid for. On the other hand, we heard former President Trump really tout his own economic record, but he also ignored the fact that a lot of his policies have questions about how they'll be paid for. I mean, just broadly speaking, Whit, not a lot of mention on taxes when we know that that is a big issue for voters and will be a huge issue here in Washington next year. Both of them tried to talk about the economy in broad brushstrokes, but did not get into a lot of those specifics that voters, when you ask them, they want to know, what is the government, what is the president going to do for me?
Yeah, no taxes on tips. Remember, both candidates were talking about that, and yet tonight we heard almost
Didn't
nothing
even come up
about
hardly.
it. So
Exactly.
Elizabeth, thank you. We appreciate it. All right, we showed you Donald Trump earlier here in the spin room following the debate, and while he was here with us, Kamala Harris attended a debate watch party talking to supporters. Here is part of what she had to say.
We've got some work to do because, listen, I think that we think today was a good day, and it kind of was. But we have 56 days to go, and guys, we're still the underdogs in this race. It's tight. We have got to win Pennsylvania, and we are going to win Pennsylvania.
Of course, Pennsylvania, a critical state, could be make or break, especially for Kamala Harris. Joining us now with more is Terry Moran. Terry, give us some context on what we saw here tonight. Trump again said, quote, talking about abortion, for example, that every legal scholar, every Democrat wanted abortion to be a matter for the states. Now, obviously, we know that that's not true. But who is he speaking to when he continues to say that?
Well, he's trying to reassure voters. Look, he's a very savvy politician, and he knows that this issue has been demonstrated, as he said tonight, in state after state, to be a problem for Republicans. So he's trying to distance himself from what the Supreme Court did in overturning Roe versus Wade. And the best formula that he can come up with is that now people get to vote on it state by state, that's what everybody wanted. He's smart enough to, and a good enough politician to know people want to have a say in their future. The problem is, and the counterattack from Kamala Harris was very effective, this is an issue, far from Roe versus Wade being unpopular, almost 2/3 of Americans, sometimes polls showed almost up to 70% of Americans supported Roe versus Wade. It's hard to get 70% of Americans to agree on anything. And yet Roe versus Wade was supported. They felt that this was a settlement they could live with. The Republican Party, of course, very different. And now he's stuck with it, and he's trying to find a way to get out of it by saying, well, everybody wanted Roe versus Wade overturned, and now everybody's happy that they're voting about it. Polls show that's not true.
Terry, what about the issue of election integrity? Again, the former president would not acknowledge that he lost the 2020 election, also saying that, when he was pressed multiple times from David Muir on whether he had any regrets about January 6th, he said no, he had nothing to do with it. What do you think voters are going to make of that as they head to vote once again in November?
That's really an issue that's baked in. Donald Trump has successfully, in the Republican Party, cemented the notion that there was something wrong with the 2020 election. He believes it was completely stolen, and there are lots of people who believe utter fabrications about mules and stolen votes and things like that. None of that evidence ever held up in any court of law, and it wasn't just because Trump was judged not to have standing. It's because judges looked at the evidence. Trump asked the Attorney General of the United States to order every single U.S. attorney in every single district in America to look for evidence of voter fraud. They came back, they said there isn't any. Okay, but what he's trying to do is that in some way that should be rejected. Now his allies say, well, some of the COVID changes to voting practices in the states operated as disadvantaging Republicans, and so that you can reject the election for. But really with Trump, why is a mystery. It's deep in his psychology that he simply cannot acknowledge that he lost.
Terry Moran for us. We always appreciate your perspective. Thank you. Let's go ahead and head over to our senior White House correspondent, Selena Wang. Selena, you've been on the floor here in the spin room and recently spoke with California Governor Gavin Newsom. We heard Donald Trump here saying that, he won the debate and Kamala Harris lost badly. I'm assuming the California governor had a very different perspective.
Yeah, well, you're right on that, Whit. And Newsom has known Harris for decades. He says that the version of Vice President Harris we saw on the debate stage today is the one that he has known all of these years, strong and commanding and calm. But really, of course, this comes down to the voters. And voters consistently say they want the candidate who's going to bring about the most change. Gavin Newsom believes that Harris delivered that and that this debate did move the needle when it comes to those critical undecided voters in those battleground states. Take a listen to what else the governor told me.
It was a terrible night for Donald Trump. It was a great night for freedom and for democracy, liberty, the rule of law, and Kamala Harris.
So did she successfully get under Donald Trump's skin?
It would, I mean, across the board consistently. Crowd size, he starts talking about dogs and crowd size again, somehow blaming Nancy Pelosi for January 6th. He was consistent with his past, which is unhinged on the issue, offered no compelling vision for the future, talked about himself, didn't talk about you. She consistently talked about you, me, the future of this country, and talked about things the American people care about.
And with Governor Newsom, they're referring to some of the false claims that Trump had made, including those inaccurate statements about that Ohio town, claiming falsely that they were stealing and eating their neighbors' pets. And Newsom and other Harris surrogates believe that Harris did exactly what she needed to do to confront the outlandish lies, to bring them to the fore, but also not get dragged down into any rabbit holes and bring it back to her message about the future.
Selena Wang, thank you. Let's turn over to, for more on this, we want to bring in our White House correspondent, Mary Alice Parks. And Mary Alice, I'm excited to speak with you because you were actually in the room. There were few journalists allowed inside, so you were there. What were the things that stood out to you?
Yeah, I was really honored. I was one of just a few journalists, like you said, that actually got to be in the room. I will tell you one thing that stood out right off the bat, the way that the vice president walked across that stage, really owned the stage by offering her hand in that handshake. She seemed to want to present herself as bigger in that moment, not only offering a handshake, sort of a peace offering in that way, but also really to own the physical space. It was interesting to watch her throughout the night. She moved around her podium quite often, turning to look at the former president, back to camera, folding her hands, unfolding her hands, making many facial expressions as he spoke. Very different from the former president. He directed all of his attention straight into that camera, hardly ever, if ever, glanced across at her. And of course, viewers looking at every single bit of their interactions, their body language, their style, as well as their substance wit.
And important to remember, this was the very first time the two of them have actually met in person. So it was quite a moment. Mary Alice Parks, thank you. Well, that is our show for tonight. I'm Whit Johnson here in the spin room of the first and potentially the only debate between Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. We'll see. They're already talking about the possibility of another. But what a night it was. Thank you so much for joining us here all evening long. ABC News Live is here for you all night with the latest news, context, and analysis. You can always find us on Disney+, Hulu, Roku, and wherever you might stream. Keep it right here on ABC News Live. Have a great night.
is Impact by Nightline.
Are you kidding me?